Testing.
Are we good? You good? Okay, perfect. Okay, good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Sparta Township Planning Board. I'd like to call this meeting to order. For the record, this meeting is being held on June 21st, 2023. It's beginning at 7:04 PM at the Sparta Township Municipal Building located at 65 Main Street, Sparta, New Jersey. And the live stream can be viewed on YouTube at www.youtube.com/@SpartaTWP. Please note that adequate public notice of this meeting was given in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. Let's begin with a salute to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. First, I'd like to take a moment to welcome back Kathleen Sarmad from Harbor Consultants. Thanks for being here this evening. Next, I'd like to also say a large thank you again to Michelle Lantow for helping us through this transition period. Your efforts have been greatly appreciated. And finally, I'd like to provide a very warm welcome to our newest addition, the current Planning Board Secretary, Dory Fox. I think I can speak for the entire board when I say we look forward to working with you and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Would you please call the roll?
Councilman Dean Blumetti,
Here.
Jeanette Burke,
Here.
Vice Chairman Ron Day,
Here.
Christine Dunbar,
Here.
Bill Enright,
Here.
Justin Canellis, Angela Cassie,
Here.
Chairwoman Celeste Luciano,
Here.
Ernest Reichstad,
Here.
Peter Ski, Mike Sylvester.
Thank you. Okay.
Madam Chairman, before we start, it might be wise to have the board make a motion to appoint Dory Fox as our planning board secretary. I think
Okay.
we would like that.
Is it so moved?
I make a motion? Second.
Okay.
All in favor or roll call?
A roll call, please.
Roll call, please.
Councilman Dean Blumetti,
Yes.
Jeanette Burke,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Ron Day,
Yes.
Christine Dunbar,
Yes.
Bill Enright,
Yes.
Angela Cassie,
Yes.
Chairwoman Celeste Luciano,
Yes.
Ernest Reichstad.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now that that's taken care of, we have several items on the agenda, including the public hearing of Planning Board Application Number 706, Delmar Woodport Road, the Capital Improvement Plan Review for Sparta High School and Sparta Middle School Solar Array, and the Planning Board Application Number 699, Sparta Land Company LLC. Please note that the application number 699 has been carried to our July 19th meeting. The agenda had an incorrect date of the 21st. The meeting is July 19th.
There'll be no further notice for people who receive notice or for mailing, for publication. So the Sparta Land Company application is carried without additional notices to July 19th, 2023 at 7 PM in this meeting room.
So I believe we're ready to begin with the public hearing of Planning Board Application Number 706, Delmar Woodport Road LLC, 200 and 210 Woodport Road, Block 2014, Lots 7 and 8, amended site plan.
Oh, and if you'd like to bring another chair up, you may. After you do that, we'll swear in any witnesses. So, Bob, before you get started, let's swear in the witnesses.
Of course. I can identify them for the record, or if you want to.
Let's let them just identify themselves, but give them a chance to settle in. So, and lady and gentlemen, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
And starting on my right with Jason, please state your name, address, and spell your last name. You can use a business address.
Dolan, D-O-L-A-N, Dolan and Dean Consulting Engineers, 181 West High Street in Somerville.
Owen Dykstra, Dykstra Associates, 11 Lawrence Road, New Jersey. Professional engineer.
Okay, we'll just confirm for the record that and you may be seated, please, if you would like. The board recognizes, accepts the qualifications of Jason Dunn as professional planner and Owen Dykstra as professional engineer. And I think we will probably be accepting the qualifications of Elizabeth Dolan, but I don't believe she's testified before this board as it currently constituted. So when you do qualifications, please include Ms. Dolan's.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Good evening, Madam Chairwoman, members of the board, professionals and staff. My name is Robert McBriar. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Shank, Price, Smith & King, and we represent the owner applicant 210 Woodport LLC, and application number 706 before you this evening. The subject property consists of two contiguous parcels known as lots 7 and 8 in block 2014. It's located just north of the First Hope Bank property and between Woodport Road and Conestoga Trail. It's situated in the township's C1 Community Commercial Zone. The applicant is here this evening seeking to modify prior approvals to permit the future building on Lot 7 to be used as a medical office, which is specifically permitted in the zone, instead of the previously contemplated mixed use. As a result of the proposed change from mixed use to office use, the applicant seeks variance relief for the number of off-street parking spaces required, for impervious coverage, and design waiver for reduced parking space dimensions. These items, as well as the items that were presented in Mr. Simmons' report and the planner's report, will be addressed and discussed in greater detail by the applicant's professionals. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Owen Dykstra to provide a brief history of the prior approvals and to review the proposed modifications to the previously approved site plan.
Okay, first I'd like to mark the exhibit I brought along. It's one of the sheets from the site plan that was originally approved, and I just added some color to it.
That'll be A1 and colored rendering of site plan.
Jason will hand out color copies of it, so you have.
Yes, please.
This plan is entitled Presentation Plan. It's dated 6/20/2023. I'll just give you an idea of where this property is located. It's located on Woodport Road. On this map, the right is facing north. So you head this way, you head downtown Sparta. To the left of the property is the First Hope Bank. Behind the property is Conestoga Trail. And there's two existing lots that are already developed. This property was in front of the board for a site plan about a year ago, and the construction began on the site, so the site improvements are already installed. The only not built is the septic and the building and the sidewalks. So I'm just going to give you a brief history of this application because it has kind of a long history, because it kind of started off where we're going to end up. So the property is, we call it the Del Mar at Woodport Mixed Use Campus. It's located at the intersection of Woodport Road and which is State Highway Route 181 and Conestoga Trail. The property received approvals for subdivision and site plan in 2001. That created the southerly 0.93 acre lot known as Lot 8, Block 2014, and the remainder Lot 7, which is the bigger lot that has the existing building on it. This approval provided a campus-like setting with shared parking, access, and stormwater. It included an approval for a 10,000 square foot, 2-story office building in the location that's shown in blue. So it's the same location as it had been, as it's currently proposed. subdivision was perfected at the time, but the building was not constructed. It's important to note that that approval had 48% impervious coverage variance granted at that point in time when they contemplated the development of the site. The Berardis purchased the building in 2014 after it had fallen into disrepair. They proceeded to renovate the building and re-tenant it, and today it is fully occupied. During COVID, office space became very difficult to lease, and there was a need for apartments, they felt. So we went back to the board with the same application, more or less, as the original, just converting the second story of the office building to 4 apartments. That approval was granted in 2022. The approval included a variance to allow 53% coverage. However, it was granted with a consideration of an incentive ordinance, which allowed 50% coverage on the lot. So construction began on the site work in 2022. The Berardis were preparing to begin construction of the building when they were approached by Regional Cancer Care Associates. RCCA had been in search of a new home in Sparta, as they've been outgrown their current facility in the Sparta Health and Wellness Facility. And they've been looking for a space in Sparta for a while. They've been in town for approximately 20 years operating in the Health and Wellness Center. The Berardis, wanting to assist in keeping RCCA services in our community, agreed to move forward with an approval for the 2-story office building to accommodate RCCA's needs. The amendment of the site plan tonight requests the change of the second floor apartments back to the office space that was originally approved. The plans do not propose changes to the site improvements that had been approved in the 2021 approval, as the bulk of them are constructed. The location of the HVAC units will be ground mounted as previously approved. There'll be no changes to the exterior of the building or the colors of the building that was proposed, and that building is in keeping. It's kind of in the same architectural theme as the existing, more historic building. It's interesting, that was my dad's first office building for Dykstra Associates in the 70s, so it's been a long time. The tenant will submit for approval of the subcommittee for any signage. It would likely include changing the copy in the existing monument sign and a building facade signs, which will be per ordinance. The conversion of the second floor from apartments to office space increases the number of parking spaces required for the entire site from 88 to 104. On site, we have 92 spaces proposed, which we had 91 mentioned, but it's actually 92, which was corrected by your planner. Public Law 2021, Chapter 171 is an state law that requires make-ready parking stalls for electric vehicle chargers be incorporated into all site plans. On the site, we are required to provide a minimum of 3 based on the calculations of make-ready spaces. We have an area shown in yellow on the plan, and that would be the proposed 4 make-ready spaces. And as an incentive to provide the EV spaces, each make-ready space counts as 2 parking stalls for the purpose of calculating the number of required parking spaces. So the 92 spaces proposed count as 96 for zoning purposes. This leaves a shortfall of 8 stalls in order to meet the required 104 parking stalls. Our traffic consultant will provide testimony demonstrating that the on-site parking supply of 92 spaces is adequate for the proposed mixed use when considering the parking demand peak is at different times. The hours of the facility will operate same as they currently do, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. They don't have weekend hours, they don't have evening hours. That is opposite of the peak demand of parking for apartment use. The facility will have 25 to 30 staff members when operating. However, we did want to demonstrate that we could comply with the parking if a parking issue were to arise at the site. The area that I've shown in green is a proposed what we call banked 8-stall parking lot. So theoretically, with those additional 8, we could meet the 104 requirement. And that would also keep us, we'd still be below the 40% impervious coverage on the lot. Being that this area is located along the neighborhood street, the benefits of the additional spaces would not outweigh the impacts of the removal of the trees and the green space that provides a visual break for the residents across the street on Conestoga Trail. The proposed change of use also results in a reconsideration of the impervious coverage variance, as it will no longer fall under the incentive ordinance. The overall site works as a campus with shared parking and access and cross easements for the shared parking access and stormwater. And when the overall campus is analyzed as a whole, the overall impervious coverage is 36.3%. So if you take the two lots combined, you take all the impervious, you're at 36.3. And if you added the green parking lot, the banked parking that we're speaking of, that would take it up to 38.5%, which is below the overall 40% impervious coverage standard. However, the impervious coverage is not proportionately split over the two lots, resulting in having 53.1% impervious coverage on lot 7 and 30% impervious coverage on lot 8. A variance is requested to allow for the 53.1% impervious on the smaller lot, with a condition that the overall impervious for the two lots remain below the 40% requirement, be added as a deed restriction. In addition, we did look at an alternative lot configuration to see if modifying the lot layout, because we have the ability, controlling both lots, to move the lot lines and still meet the bulk standards and the impervious coverage standards. This area that is like a panel in the orange, we looked at adding that, taking that from lot 7 to lot 8. That would increase the size of lot 8 large enough to bring it below the 40%. However, it does not have any visual impact. You'd still have the same project. So in effect, it would be a lot line adjustment just for zoning purposes in order to get the ordinance, to be able to meet the ordinance. I did prepare calculations of that scenario under the alternate lot configuration. Lot 7 would have 34.7% impervious, and lot 8 would have 39.1%, for the total of 36.3. And if the green area were to be built, then lot 7 would have 37.9%, and lot 8 would have 39.1. So it can be done. It does not create any variances because we have dual frontage, so we have the ability to have frontage on both lots. For both lots, we meet all the setback requirements on both lots. So it's more of a technical variance is what I would call this when you look at the overall. We're also requesting a design waiver, which was granted for both loading spaces and to allow 9x18 parking stalls. The bulk of the parking stalls on site, well, probably about half of them are 9x20, the ones that were currently there. The new ones that are proposed in front of the blue building, they're 9x18. Obviously, those parking stalls are already built. We'd prefer not to modify them. And there's no real impact with the change in use. All of those spaces nose into either the lawn or over a sidewalk, and the sidewalks are wide enough for a car to nose over 2 feet and still have plenty of room to pass by. With regard to the deliveries, the Cancer Center gets deliveries by small vans and also FedEx type trucks, so there's no need for a loading dock and loading area. So that waiver that was granted originally, we feel is appropriate for this use. That covers, oh yeah, I wanted to touch base on how they handle their medical waste. You know, they're a regulated facility. Everything is controlled in their environment. All the drugs are controlled. They're in locked rooms. All disposal of them goes out of the building through approved facilities, picks them up. Nothing goes down the drain. So I know that was a concern in the environmental report, so I wanted to cover that. I think that covers my testimony. I think it'd be good to hear from Betsy, our traffic consultant, to cover the parking and how it integrates having both uses.
Before we do that, Owen, could you just elaborate on whether you're still providing the one very low-income unit in the existing building as proposed in the 2022 approval?
We're eliminating the 4 units, which created the requirement for the low income unit. So we are not proposing to provide that, but it's up for consideration if that's an issue.
I think it probably is. I mean, it doesn't prevent you from, it allows you to continue to offer the affordable unit by deed restriction from the market to affordable program, and allows you to take advantage of the 50% coverage on lot 8. It doesn't get you to 53%, but it continues that incentive provision of the affordable housing ordinance. So seems like it's advisable.
Mr. Collins, do you have any other questions before?
I do not, but I think the board members might want, I don't know that they want to go to the next witness yet. You might want to, board might want to invite questions, have board member questions of this witness and then public questions of this witness. But it's up to the chair.
Board have any questions for this particular witness?
One question I have is, so you're requesting a design waiver for the smaller parking spaces. I thought the reasons for the smaller parking spaces on the new lot was based on having the apartments there. Well, now that they're not going to be there, shouldn't it go back to the commercial size space, the 9 by 20 versus the 9 by 18?
9 by 20 is a typical parking space that we utilize when cars park face to face. In this situation where none of the cars are like nose to nose, you have the ability to pull up farther. So a 9 by 18 is the appropriate size. We feel the benefit of not having the additional impervious is valid in this situation. And the RSIS space standard is 9 by 18, and that's where that number comes from. We see probably most of our applications where we don't park nose to nose have gone to 9 by 18. It's just a better environmental plan for these projects, and it doesn't impact the ability to park.
But you recognize the standard for this would be 9 by 20 under normal circumstances?
Of course.
Okay. The other question I have is relative to the number of parking spaces. So I thought when I read the report, there was 91 being proposed or 92 being proposed against the requirement for 98. But I guess that 98 is now 104. So the variance is good. The size of the variance is going to increase up to between 92 and 104 versus 92 versus 98.
And it comes down to the way the gross area was calculated of the building. There's different ways that people measure, because your ordinance is gross leasable, not gross area. Those are different numbers. You take out stairways and things, and but your planner
But
pointed out.
right now, so the variance being requested is from 92 to 104 and not
That's
92 to
correct.
108.
We'd rather
I'm
be on
to
the safe
98.
side because your planner called it out that way. So
Okay.
that's our approach.
And with recognition for the credits for the electric vehicle parking spaces, which I believe the testimony was 90, that brings it up to 96.
Correct.
So that would shrink the delta a little bit more.
I have some questions. Thank you for what you shared so far. Is it true that parking for this zone is not allowed in the front and side yards without approval?
I think it's within 25 feet of the front yard is the way this zone is worded. It's been a little while since I looked at that. We're not proposing to change anything that's already approved. So it's a existing condition at this point.
But you're not operational yet, right?
It's operational.
Correct. The new building,
No, the parking lot.
it's being used?
Yes.
Okay. So I can ask Mr. Collins, is there anything that we need to focus on regard to the side or front yard, the proximity of the parking?
I think Dave could help you with that if there is a issue. The thing to remember is that what he's saying is that that's already built. Not just, it was built for the original buildings that are already existing. Is that right, Dolan?
No, as
Oh.
we had the 2022 approval, and the parking lots have been constructed based on that approval.
Oh, the parking lot was constructed.
And I would add, if I may, for the board, as far as the parking goes, they did have the previously approved site plan that Mr. Dykstra mentioned. Plus, when you look at the overall parking, it's on two different lots. I remember reviewing the descriptions for the various cross easements that are already in place. So basically, the entire campus has already been set up that way with those parking lots as part of the overall package, if you will. And I would ask, if I may, at this time, just as one question that I had, those cross easements that I just referred to, I know I reviewed them. Were they in fact recorded already?
They were not yet recorded, anticipating changes to the current plan, but they were reviewed, I believe, by the township. We are prepared to record them with any changes that may affect that or impact that based on this evening's hearing.
Okay, but basically, the original descriptions that I reviewed, the parking lot configuration that they were based on hasn't changed.
Correct.
Okay.
One more question on the impervious coverage. So we're looking at the two lots, and the combination of the two lots is under the 40%. Question I have is, you said something about being deed restricted. Could you just explain that a little bit further, what that means?
Because we're effectively taking the impervious coverage from
Right.
one lot and moving it to the other, we would deed restrict the whole to not exceed the 40%.
So that would prevent further development after something like this was approved? Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions?
Not at this time from me.
The proposed parking lot that's in green,
Yes.
what is that location now?
Lawn, and there's some trees along the street.
And that would be all removed to add the 8 additional spots.
So if you desired that, yes. We don't feel it's necessary and appropriate, given, you'll hear in Betsy's testimony, the way the uses alternate when they have peak parking. So we feel the 92 is more than adequate for the actual site.
Would it be an additional driveway, or they would use that driveway that's already existing next to it?
It would be an additional driveway.
So 2 curb cuts in that?
There's 2 currently. There would be a third.
The green spot currently has a curb cut in it?
I'll curb cut in order to get access to that.
I'm not sure if Billy's
Any
done.
additional signage proposed?
The only additional signage will be building-mounted signs, and we'll come to the subcommittee with conforming signage.
Mr. Dykstra, could you please talk to us about the lot, the adjoining lot, or the adjacent lot that's behind the bank? It's tax lot 6. It looks like existing dwelling. Is that a private residence? And can you talk about the buffer between that property and the parking area or the driveways there?
Yeah, there was a conservation easement created, and this area is landscaped between the parking lot on our site and the house in order to create a buffer there, and that's been installed.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Dykstra, thank you. Do you feel that the additional curb cuts will be a disturbance to the residents along Conestoga?
I don't think the benefits of adding 8 spaces offsets the visual impairment that you create. I think it's better to have a green space between the building and the street that's there now. And especially given that we don't feel the additional spaces are needed.
What about the traffic flow in and out of that area into the neighborhood?
The
That a
traffic
concern?
flow, the additional 8 spaces, I don't think it would change the traffic flow. You're still gonna have the same number of vehicles. So that's not really relevant, I don't think, from a traffic perspective.
How many feet is that proposed new parking, the green to the blue building?
What would be some of the alternatives to reduce the impervious coverage on that lot?
You could reduce the sidewalks. I don't think it's a great idea, but you could reduce some of those. It would require people to walk through the parking lot to get to the entrance, you know, that's not ideal, but you could definitely do that. Outside of that, you could, that's without changing the type of pavement. I mean, you could go to a porous type pavement and still impervious under your ordinance, but we've already met the stormwater infiltration, water quality, and all those items. So it'd be a hardship at this point to do that.
Building size, I guess,
Well, building size,
I mean, that's always an option, right?
I mean, the reality here is if you don't approve this, the building gets built and it gets 4 apartments. So it's not,
Mhm.
this exact project gets built. When you drive down the road, it won't look any different. It'll just have 4 apartments instead of
Cancer.
the cancer's facility.
Mr. Dykstra, you said that that proposed area for bank parking, that you don't feel it's necessary,
Correct.
correct? So if you didn't do that, what are we talking about in terms of impervious coverage? Because you said you just leave it
It would stay exactly where it is. Overall, you'd be at 36.3% for the overall.
for the whole
campus.
thing, okay.
Can you share with us, please, the layout, the slope of the 2 lots? I believe it slopes from my left to my right down to that corner of triangle, is that correct?
Yes, I mean, it's relatively level where the buildings are, and then it slopes down. The stormwater basin is built at the V at the end of the property. All the water drains there.
Roughly, what is the drop from top to bottom? Do you recall?
Lowest area of the property is elevation 990, and where the proposed building is 1,036 first floor. So it's about 46 feet.
Mr. Dexter, one last question, just to make sure that I understand correctly. So initially, there was going to be one low-income apartment. I think what I'm hearing is right now there is none, but you're open to consideration?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions, or should we move to the next witness?
One more quick one. The original plan with the 4 apartment, 2-bedroom units, was that had additional parking or it did not?
I'm sorry. Distracted.
The approved plan with the 4-unit apartment building or
Yes.
second floor, that had additional parking with it proposed already or not?
No, same 92 spaces.
Same 92 spaces. So you're trading an 8-bedroom second floor with 20, I mean, you said 25 to 30 staff members. That's, if you put 15 on each floor, that's a 9-person difference. 7-person difference.
Also have patients, so. I think you have to look at it as a whole. I think Betsy can hit on that, to how the parking will work as it's integrated together. I think that's the critical point of this.
Mr. Dykstra, I also feel that it's critical that we're losing 4 apartments there, and that, you know, it would be nice to have affordable housing unit. Can you see any way to make that happen?
I'm not sure I understand to add 4 units back and an affordable, or
Well,
just
to
the
ha- to
affordable.
perhaps have an affordable unit placed in the existing apartment complex.
Yeah, that's how we had it contemplated in the original, and that's what we're considering.
I think we're ready for the next witness.
Great, thank you. Ms. Dolan, can you describe, please, for the board, your level of education and professional qualifications?
I have a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Rutgers. I'm a licensed professional engineer registered in New York, in Delaware. My New Jersey license is in good standing. I'm a member of the Institute of Transportation Engineers. Also had the opportunity to review traffic, parking, and DOT aspects. I know I've been here, I just can't tell you when. It could have been years ago.
Madam Chairman, unless the board has any questions, I would recommend that you find that Elizabeth Dolan is qualified as a traffic engineer.
She is qualified as a traffic engineer.
Thank you. Ms. Dolan, you were retained to prepare a parking study and analysis as it relates to the subject property, correct?
Yes, I was.
And can you briefly explain for the board what you reviewed and/or inspected as part of your study and analysis?
Yes, I was specifically asked to review the parking supply and requirements and look at the proposed parking supply as it relates to the variance. So I prepared and issued a letter dated March 24, 2023, that sets forth the parking requirements pursuant to ordinance, and then goes on to provide what is called a shared parking analysis. The Institute of Transportation Engineers, or ITE, has many publications that are available to traffic engineers, and one of them is called the Parking Generation Manual. And for various land uses, they provide an hour-by-hour parking demand. And so in order to perform what we call a shared parking analysis, we look at the hour-by-hour parking demand for the apartments and the hour-by-hour parking demand associated with the professional medical office. And as would be expected, the peak demand for parking at the residences is overnight. There's still a demand midday when the offices are generating their peak, but based upon the requirements and these ITE hour-by-hour factors, I came up with a parking demand on a typical weekday of 86 parking spaces. And that's because some of the residents aren't at home when there's peak activity at the office. And of course, the overall parking demand is lower at night because the parking supply and demand for the residences is much lower than the requirement for the office space. I would point out that we were talking about gross versus leasable, and just if we were to go with the gross, it would be another few spaces, and it would bring us to 92, which is actually the number that is proposed on site without the banked or the credit for the EV spaces. The other thing I would say is that the applicant had been studying the existing demands on Lot 7 for a few months and found a maximum demand of 33 spaces contrasted with the requirement of 57 spaces. So we have actual counts to show that the demand on Lot 7 is not as high as the ordinance would require. I would also point out that the ITE provides parking ratios based on studies at different land uses, and currently, offices are not requiring as high as 5 per thousand, which is what your ordinance requires, 1 per 200, but they're closer to 3 spaces per thousand. So that, I think, sort of supports some of what we're seeing on Lot 7 as to the actual demand. So there's a couple of different factors, the shared parking, actual parking ratios that have come down. 20 years ago, a ratio of 4 to 5 per thousand was the required demand at most offices. Now, even for medical office, it's just over 3 spaces per thousand. So I think based on those different factors, the board could feel comfortable with the variance. And again, based on the worst-case shared parking, using your ordinance requirement and the gross building area, the shared parking yields a demand of 92, which is the number of spaces on the plan. If we use the leasable area, it's 86 spaces. That's the sum of my analysis.
So in your professional opinion, the proposed parking supply of 92 spaces is adequate for the site and the spaces provided?
I believe it is probably with a surplus.
Any questions of this witness?
I do. Yep. Thank you, Ms. Dolan, appreciate it. A couple questions about the data. I saw in the report that the data in the study is from a variety of geographies, locations, which is great. Also, the data is from the 1980s, 1990s, 2000s, and 2010s. Can you comment on that and how relevant it is today in 2023 and looking forward for the next 5, 10, 50 years? Because to me, it seems like many more people now are working from home, working remotely, so the daytime demand could be much different than it was over the last 40 years.
That's true. And the fact that they kept in some of the older data for the office space, I think helps to keep it fair so that you're not, as I said, the ITE's most current parking demand ratios are at 3 per thousand, but they've kept all the data in so that it's not skewed to a too low of a supply. So the data is looked at by the ITE and it's refined and updated. And when they find inconsistencies or data points that no longer seem to apply, then they discard those. So, but it is the recommended go-to source for traffic engineers. And I forget that it may be on here, but the 5th edition of parking generation is what we're up to. And that's just, it's a few years old, but it's definitely was pre-COVID. So there could be, as you're indicating, a higher demand on weekdays for work at home type of situations.
Mm-hmm. So the data on the residents and the need and demands of residents is no longer relevant in terms of the proposal, correct? Because it's going to be just office building?
Right.
Right, okay.
Well, except that there's existing offices.
Right.
Existing.
Existing residents, yep,
Right.
yep,
And
okay.
I
So-
would
and
actually
she's
point
counted
out-
those.
I've
She's-
counted those, and I actually had an error on the high side. So it's 17 required, and I used 21. So there's a little buffer in there, of a space or 2 per hour.
And does that account for families with kids that might be home during the daytime, retired residents who might be home during the daytime, individuals who work in the evenings, full-time students, all those individuals who will be living there won't be leaving every morning to go to work someplace, and the ones that work from home too?
So the multifamily housing low-rise is sort of an apartment type of situation. If we had single-family homes or if we had townhouses, there'd be a different set of numbers that we'd use. But the hour-by-hour distribution is matched against your actual ordinance requirement. So we're not using their lower parking demand ratios. We're combining these hour-by-hour numbers with your ordinance requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Dunn, if I could, make sure I understand. So I believe you said that when you look at the existing lot 7, that right now that's underutilized?
Yes.
Would you know if all the apartments are being utilized, or any of them empty, or,
I would have to check.
so we don't know that, okay.
They're fully tented.
They're all
Fully
full?
tenanted.
Okay.
That's correct.
Additional questions? We ready to move on?
Yeah, no more parking.
No more questions from the dais for this witness?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Next witness, I'd like to introduce Jason Dunn to review and discuss the planning elements that support the request for variance relief.
I need the microphone, that's right. Thank you. So my name's Jason Dunn, professional planner. I think I was here last month or 2 weeks ago in front of this board on a different matter, but boy, it seems like some of the things are very similar about some shared parking and a campus style. What makes this one a little unique is that the two lots are by the same owner, and we have the ability to do a lot line adjustment to make the impervious coverage variance go away. So I'd like to first, before I get into the criteria, just kind of focus on why we don't do that. It is a possibility we can do it legally, and by ordinance, we wouldn't have any new bulk bulk variances as a result of the proposed addition to lot 8. The reason we don't do that is because even though the shapes of lots are not regulated by your ordinance, this alternative shows a piece of land that's really not really manageable. You know, who takes care of the lawn mowing, and what purpose does it serve to lot 7, to lot 8? It's easy to mix these up. Lot 8, the smaller lot. My opinion is that this qualifies for a C2 variance, grant variance for special reasons. Although it's not a use variance, some of the criteria is similar. The application of variance relief has to relate to a specific piece of property. And because, as I explained, the unique situation, these two lots are tied together by cross easements of drainage and parking. We have the unique property shape with lot frontages on 2 streets and basically the shared services of the two. Turning to the positive criteria, allowing these deviations would advance the purposes of the land use law and your master plan by upholding goals A, which is the general welfare, G, which is providing a healthcare facility to meet the needs of the community, and I, which is a visual aesthetic. We're making a project that looks great in this neighborhood, in my opinion. Allowing the site plan to remain as it was previously approved supports the functionality of the permitted use and encourages advancement of the need in the community. The RCAA intends to improve upon its existing facility by moving to this location and expanding. And I would have to assume upgrading its technological facilities and just having more room to treat the patients. Anybody that has been through it knows that when you have a person in cancer, who has cancer and they need care, a shorter ride is much better. So if we have this in our community, we keep it in our community, prevents our residents from having to drive out of the county for the care they need. That helps not only the patient, but the family and the caregivers. The overall site layout, landscaping, and building architecture, I believe, are well thought out. I've been on this project since 2021. I wasn't here from the very beginning when the first approval happened, but I've seen it through a lot of changes and upgrades, and in my opinion, it works well. So to conclude on that, I think it's a better planning alternative to leave the lots as they are, approve the technical impervious coverage variance on lot 8 with the mitigating factor that both be deed restricted to not exceed 40% for both of them, and not do the minor subdivision. So we would have the same result, the same project, either way the board chooses to act on this. As far as the parking goes, we've heard from an expert on the traffic. We've heard from Owen about how it's laid out and the possibility of building 8 more spaces. In my opinion, I agree with Owen and obviously the applicant, it's not necessary, but we could do it. We could do it, and that's important for the board to consider with the parking shortage. Also, with the 4 EV spaces, that gives us an equivalent of 8 in the parking count, which was explained. So I think it's just a better alternative because it doesn't add unnecessary impervious. I believe, my opinion, the variance can be granted without substantial public detriment to the public good. One might think that if you have a parking shortage, it could lead to autos parking on the street, off-site on the street, or in undesignated places like lawn areas or landscape areas. But as we heard, that's not the case here. We're actually, there's more than enough parking for what's proposed on these 2 lots. It's also my opinion that these 2 variances won't have an impact, negative impact on the neighbors or the zone plan. There's no further increase of impervious coverage with this proposed use above in the 2nd story. There's no additional traffic, odors, glare, excessive noise, unmanaged solid waste, or any more burden to the water or septic. The septic, as it was designed, is actually more than what is needed for this next proposed use. So I think that these benefits of these minor deviations from your design standards, from the parking, and the zoning criteria for the impervious on lot 8, I think it substantially outweighs any detriments that might come from approving this. I think the application as presented is a much better zoning alternative than building into 8-car parking lot and changing the shapes of lots. That's what I have for planning testimony.
Questions of this witness?
I did have some, Jason, on the, could you just elaborate on the status of the stormwater management basin that's under construction and whether it's going to have some additional finishing features to it and landscaping, and what will they be?
Had some landscaping that was proposed around the basin, but my recollection is that it wasn't really substantial. We could offer to add some.
How about the basin itself? Is it finished yet? Or it's newly enlarged. Is the bottom of the,
It's been a little while since I've driven by the site. I was up there, I think 2 weeks ago, and the basin was substantially graded out and built. I think there's some minor finishing things they had to do.
will there be any vegetative material on the banks of it and in the basin?
Let me check. Allow me to check quickly.
And can that be done with a sand infiltration basin?
The previous proposal did not contemplate any landscaping around the detention basin. However, we could offer that if that's something the board would like to see on that corner.
And how about in a sand infiltration basin, can you have plantings of any type or any
I can
appearance?
answer that.
Yeah.
You don't plant the bottom of it, but you can plant the slopes.
Like the bench areas where you are grass can have some plantings?
I think it's not recommended to plant the sand infiltration area because the root systems eventually impede the way it infiltrates.
Is there anybody that's maintaining that drainage basin? Because I drove by before I came in today, and there's quite a bit of stagnant water that looks quite polluted, just sitting there in the bottom of it that can be seen when people are driving by.
Yeah,
So-
during
So I was
construction.
wondering if that's being maintained, and I really like your idea, Mr. Dunn, about, planting perhaps the perennials around the edge of that. Yeah, native.
Because the site's been under construction, it's utilized as a sedimentation basin, and that's expected to have water in it. Allows the the water to the solids in the water to filter out before anything gets discharged. So once it is finally, the site construction is complete, the basin will be completed. But that's part of the process. So it's going to look like a mucky pit until it's complete.
No questions from the days?
Yep, can I go back just to the impervious coverage to make sure I understand where we were and where we are now? So when I look at the standard, it was 40, but I thought I heard that, this is originally now, I thought I heard that because of the low income, that would be increased to 50% by standard. And when I looked through our ordinances, I couldn't find anything that authorized any type of incentive for a two-floor apartment. So am I I'm going to have to look for our professionals here to see if you can help me with that. Do you agree that 50 was the right number?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, great,
50
thanks.
Incentive ordinance,
Right.
and I should have included it in my memo, but it was from the last approval.
Yeah,
And I just looked back at it. There's, section 18-8.5C, affordable unit optional incentives for non-residential and mixed-use
right.
residential and commercial developments. It offers that there would be a few incentives. One was in order to internally subsidize the required affordable housing units in new developments. They're permitted an additional 10% impervious coverage. So it's
Okay.
not actually 50, it's just 10 plus,
Got it.
depending on what the zoning is. In addition to that, it allows the ability to, I believe, share the parking and also reduce the parking requirement for the affordable units by 50%. So if two parking spaces are required for the unit, one would be required as part of the total.
Okay, so previously we were going from 50 to 53, and that's what was granted. So are we at 40 today, or are we at 50 still today?
So
In
what
terms
was
of the baseline?
existing at the time of the last approval, the existing coverage was 44.3
Okay,
when they came in for the approval.
Right.
What was approved as part of the last approval by resolution was 53.1%.
versus 44.
In excess of the
Okay.
50 requirement. So
Okay.
they were 3.1% over what was allowed.
Okay.
Um,
So how does that change with where we are today, or does it not?
It only changes as a function of the fact that technically 40% is allowed. It has no bearing really on, what was actually developed in that the site's already been constructed to the 53.1%. Technically, the standard changes now that the apartments over the retail are no longer permitted.
Okay.
I know Mr. Collins had brought up, if they do offer the other unit, the affordable unit, in the existing building, would that still allow the incentive ordinance to kick in?
And I'm satisfied that it would, and we should also focus on this, that what the benefit of this could be is that there would be no additional market units to generate the subsidy for the one affordable unit in the existing building. That's very interesting and good in a Mount Laurel compliance program that you're under, because that means that no additional market units are needed. Customarily, in Mount Laurel housing requirements, 4 market units are required to generate one affordable unit. And it's actually,
It's more than that.
it actually, it 5 to 1 for rental, 4 to 1 for sale. But the simplicity of what this could do is there would only be office space and no market units to subsidize the one affordable unit if the applicant continues to provide the deed restriction that was offered in conjunction with the mixed-use building. And that was going to be an affordable unit in the building, the existing building, and that could happen on vacancy of that unit. It would be a deed restriction enforceable by the township. It would guarantee that that unit would be affordable to a very low-income household for, I believe it was a studio unit. And that is very helpful to the township because very low-income rental units are extremely hard to obtain credit for in New Jersey. And yet that is possible if that condition is still continued to be offered by the applicant And I didn't hear them absolutely say no, so I'm suggesting that it's something to
My-
consider, so.
My question then, so because they're at 100% occupancy, I just want to make sure that I had it straight. So it would be upon a vacancy
Yes,
of
and- but
that
they're-
particular unit.
Or of any efficiency unit, yes. And I think that's understood by them, and that was agreed to them, by them in the past. We're not hearing it yet on this one, but it would be advisable, so.
And I guess my next question is regarding deed restriction. So does deed restriction transfer with the potential sale of property? I mean,
Yes.
okay.
Yes, a deed restriction would be, we always make sure that they're recorded against the property. There are also easements here because of the cross easements for driveways and parking. And those things get recorded against the property. And they also contain a standard provision that we require, which is that they're enforceable by the township of Sparta as a third-party beneficiary, which means we're not getting the easement, we're getting the restriction or requirement, but we're able to enforce it under New Jersey law as a third-party beneficiary. It sounds a little complicated, but it's actually quite straightforward. We're not the grantee or the grantor necessarily, but we do have the ability to enforce it. Sometimes we will be the grantee. The affordable housing unit actually does, it was actually drafted, I believe, and I never heard it being objected to by the applicant. So it's just pretty much standard form deed restriction for affordable housing. They run for 30 years, and they require the person who owns them, in this case it would be the apartment building owner, to re-rent them only to people who are qualified, households that are qualified by the Township of Sparta as affordable, which is interesting numbers, complicated numbers, but basically it's related to median income. And there are many, many people, 40% of the population are in the category of being low and moderate income households. So it's quite possible for them to do it. It might even be possible for it to be an existing resident of Sparta.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I just want to go back, because I wasn't really sure that I understood the answer fully, so let me ask it a little more simpler. So when I look at what the variance was between the requirement and what was approved versus the requirement today versus what we're being asked to approve, I believe the delta has gotten greater in terms
Yes.
of impervious coverage?
Yes,
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And Madam Chair and Mr. Collins, we did consult with the applicant, and they would be willing to deed restrict that based upon a vacancy. So that would increase the baseline threshold to the 50%. The delta would then be what it was initially, 53.1 to 50.
Would you be willing to consider going to 2 based on there's increases of the variance for the parking and increases for variances for the impervious coverage? Would you consider 2 low-income houses?
The applicant would do the one that was previously contemplated.
So the answer is no.
Well, you don't get an additional 10% for each affordable housing unit. You get the benefit for the one.
And
So,
that,
Ron, I'm sorry. Just to clarify, the one unit in the prior approval was based on the additional 4 bedrooms.
Mhm.
So as part of the mandatory set-aside ordinance, and in addition to the incentives, the requirement for any new development of multifamily housing that's 4 or more units is 15%, rounded up. So the existing units that were on the site, the 11 apartments, did not contribute to this. They had already been previously approved. They were not a new development. It was based entirely on the 4 new apartments. So what's being offered tonight, the 1 bedroom is technically in excess of anything that's required.
So it wasn't a combination of the 2 buildings, it was just the 4 bedroom?
combination of the new
Okay,
development,
that helps me, thank
so
you.
I have a question. So is it a 1-bedroom?
Efficiency.
A student.
Oh, okay, a studio. Okay, got it.
And the building, I understand, it's an old building, there's no elevators, there's no disability access, things like that to the efficiencies are on the second floor, I presume? Or third floor? Second floor, okay.
And does the affordable housing studio, does that change the amount of parking spaces required? Then it reduces it by just a little bit,
One space,
just by
yeah.
one space. Okay.
So the requirement would be 103 spaces.
It'd be 103 as opposed to 96.
What's being
Right?
provided is 96, correct?
So, one suggestion for consideration for discussion is to keep the affordable housing unit in, allow the less parking spaces, so, just putting this out there, so allow the 90, the equivalent of 96, so the 92 plus the 4 EV ready. Allow the smaller size spaces to go forward with whatever needs to be built there. The impervious surface to allow it as is, with the cap on the combined lots of 40.
And you mentioned the deed restriction, I think?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so the affordable housing unit, keep in, allow the number of less parking spaces, allow the smaller spaces, allow the impervious surface, but with the caveat that the combined lots is still maxed at 40. That's consideration for discussion, I guess.
Madam Chairman, you should open these witnesses to the public, and you could also, because I think you're through the direct testimony, unless we hear there's going to be more, you could also open to both questions and testimony, but each person should be sworn.
I think it's appropriate to open to the floor.
Hi, Mike Devine, Oak Parkway.
Mike, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
I think the first part's pretty much been covered, but just to be clear and maybe confirm in my mind, from the experience of residents driving by, living nearby, or whatever, impact visually, aesthetically, noise, light, all that is de minimis or zero if you proceed as you laid out. Is that a correct statement?
There's no change to the approved plan, physical features versus what's already approved and under construction.
If you were to put the low-income studio, does that reduce the space available for the medical facility?
It's in a separate building.
Okay. If you're relocating a specific thing now, I guess the facility into here, into the second floor, is it just like an intake center, or is it a treatment center like chemo, radiation therapy?
I believe it's a chemo. I don't know if they do radiation there.
I mean,
But
if you
it's-
do things like that, does that bring in necessary changes to construction from weight bearing or shielding or anything like that?
And just to be clear, they're taking both floors. So the first floor is where any of the weight-bearing equipment would be. And then the second floor would be more exam rooms and things like that. But it could structurally make a difference how you build your foundation.
I think the councilman mentioned this, but if you visualize the type of clientele or patients, it's gotta be very easy for them to get in wheelchairs and everything else. There wasn't much discussion of that, but is that all in place or will be modified to accommodate that?
The site is fully accessible for handicap, and it has the elevator proposed for access to the second floor.
So there's no elevator now, that's gonna be put in.
This is a brand-new building, so it will be built with an elevator.
Oh, Owen, why don't you use the Exhibit A1 to point to the new building footprint and the existing building, and if you had an architectural rendering of the proposed building that's not yet built, that would be helpful.
Is this the Delmar building you're talking about?
This is the Delmar building.
Okay, and where's Woodport Road on that?
On the bottom of the property.
Okay.
This is the First Hope Bank.
Yeah.
So the new building is the blue building that's proposed to the south of the Delmar building.
Okay.
But your point, Owen, that you're testifying to before was that the mixed-use building that was previously approved will look identical, or the new building that will be all medical offices will look the same, or
It won't change.
the same as the previously approved mixed-use building?
Correct.
Are there some exceptions for doors in the back for the For,
Yeah, there may
for the
be some,
housing
but-
units, I think there were doors in the back
There were
for
some
the
doors
housing
in the
units.
back, that'll be modified to probably one.
But the facade of the building, the
When you look at it
materials,
from the street, it's gonna look the same.
and same architectural design, do you have a picture of the architecture of what it's gonna look like? That might help here. So this will be A2 architectural elevation, I guess it is, or?
It is, proposed new building, 210 Woodport Road, dated 7/12/21. Proposed elevations prepared by Elizabeth Reeves. It shows the,
So maybe describe it to, actually, if you could stand to the left side and point,
I'm gonna just pull it forward. so
yeah,
it's-
that works well, yeah, I think that works best.
So it's a white clapboard building with a shingle roof. It's got some decorative, it's got colonial in nature, kind of ties in between the First Oak Bank and the existing Delmar building. It's a nice transition between the two.
You say clapboard, is that the same as the current building that's there, the Delmore?
Yes.
What's the relative size? Is this about the size of Delmore, shorter, or half the size?
Delmar is a kind
A pretty
of
big
Dutch
place.
colonial,
Yeah.
so it has a lot of its spaces under roof. I think scale-wise, it'll be a very similar scale. The requirements of the township, so.
You're not gonna drive by and frankly, I may be in the minority, but when First Hope got built, when I first drove by it, I thought it was like this enormous thing up on a hill. The visual impact I thought was pretty striking. We're not looking at something like that. You may disagree with that, but this will kind of blend in with the visual scape as you drive by.
Set back at the same distance from the street, so it'll have a nice rhythm coming up past the Delmar, and you'll see this building. And it has a very similar scale and nature.
Does the treatment generate any you talked about toxic waste. Did the treatment generate any noise or anything like that? Would you anticipate?
No.
All right, thank you.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your name and address.
Adrian Meerman, 12 Brook Drive. I just have a few questions about this plan that I see for the first time now, so some questions may have been answered. You mentioned the parking layout is an existing parking layout, or is this layout, especially the parking along 181 and then bending towards Conestoga Trail, is that something still to be constructed?
It's existing.
The entire area is existing,
Right.
all of them?
Yes. Yes. It's
Okay. And is that up from the road
Yes.
by about, what is it, 5, 6 feet?
approximately.
Something like that. Is there any kind of planting, tree planting?
Could we go back to that, Mr.
I'm sorry.
Dykstra? You can't be about that when you're talking about the surveyed site plan. So you have a plan, A1. He asked you a question, you should answer this precise question, was the number of feet. Well, let's focus on Conestoga Trail, but if there are any other setbacks you're trying to get, Mr.
He
Mayorman.
was asking from Woodport, right?
Okay, what,
Yes, I was asking from Woodport, and I was actually asking, my question is about the visual effect, the impact
so the
of,
actual number of feet from the right-of-way to the paved parking, to the existing new parking, there's new parking on lot
Yeah.
8.
The new parking lot is it varies, obviously, but it varies from, it averages about 1,032 is the elevation. And the grade of the road immediately in front is 1,028, so 4 feet. But it varies because it's sloping.
4 feet higher, but how many feet of distance between the curb of the parking lot and the right-of-way of Woodport Road? the closest point.
It runs parallel to Woodport Road, and it's set back 32 feet from the curb to curb.
Oh, from the curb.
It's 32 feet from the curb
Between the curbs.
of the pavement to the curb of the, is that enough for any kind of plantings of trees, any landscaping as such?
We have a landscape plan that was approved. It shows some plantings along Woodport Road.
And what's the nature of those plantings?
Jason's the landscape architect, so I'll let him answer that.
Those are Glossolalia shrubs, so they'll grow about this high, readily pruned.
So that is more a suburban type planting.
Know what that means, it's suburban.
Suburban is when you have trimmed, like shrubs that can be trimmed to be kept within a certain shape, within a certain height, within
yes.
a certain character, as opposed to the landscape of Sparta, which is more, I would say, natural in that trees are not always growing so elegantly, and we have like wild shrubs in places, and so we have a certain character. This is more a civilized look, would you say?
My opinion is that this is the appropriate shrub for this location because you don't want it to overgrow near the road or block the views to the building. So I think it's important to choose the right shrub for this. That's what I think the Glossolalia does. It's also a flowering shrub. There's no provision in your ordinance to choose quote unquote naturalistic plantings. So it depends on the site. We have a colonial architectural style that we're trying to stay within that vernacular.
Right. I'm less concerned about the view of the building, which is 2 stories high, so we're going to see the building. I'm more concerned about those parking spaces and the cars. What we have now, as we leave, say, as we enter Sparta from Route 15 and we go up 181, we still have a pretty rural character, relatively few buildings, and more space wider apart. Now we have a greater concentration of buildings, and we have a denser look. And I was just thinking, plus we have all those parking spaces. So we have a big parking lot right in front of the building. So the view of the building is already disturbed. So I'm thinking, what kind of planting can we do that we mitigate for that?
I would stay with the Glossolalia. I would stay with that choice. We could do something, I mean, I would be open to your professionals maybe suggesting something different, but I think it's important to be something that wouldn't be unkempt and wild.
Okay, yeah, right. We do have 32 feet, so we do have quite a bit of space to play with. I mean, that's
That's
what I,
32 feet curb to curb.
Curb to curb,
We're not allowed
yes.
to plant in the DOT right of way.
correct. So the road is safe because we'll be planting away from the road, correct? And so I'm just thinking, what kind of trees could be planted there in order to preserve a bit of the character of Sparta as you enter from that approach?
Two tree, they're called tree lilacs, near the 2 parking spaces in the front. And we don't offer any street trees along the parking area for maintenance reasons, both for the DOT and for our parking areas.
So the parking lots are exposed to view
Yes. With a visual blockade of the abelia.
of
Mr.
shrubs.
Mr. Jana, he doesn't
Right.
have the benefit of seeing the landscape plan, but there are other trees mixed in to the landscape plan. You have some spruces, some red oaks, some juniper bushes, some hollies, not along that strip, but mixed in throughout. So the abelia that he was describing is really just that strip, but it is mixed in, so it's just to be clear. No problem.
Yeah. Right.
I don't know if you want to can you take a look at the
Yeah,
landscape
Mr.
plan?
Mayorman, if you would like to go closer and look at the landscape plan that's of record, you could do that.
Sure.
If you can, Jason, you can talk, but talk into
Right.
that mic.
So these then are the individual shrubs that will grow together into a hedge, but the hedges always be kept low.
It doesn't have to be. It could grow up to 6 feet if they let it, yes.
But there are no trees here because you think that's, because you mentioned that is maintenance.
Right.
That's a maintenance.
There's also electric power equipment right in front of the property there, so we don't want any root systems to correspond.
And what kind of planting is this and this?
That actually is natural vegetation, but it has been since removed.
Will it return somehow?
In order to plant the detention basin sides,
Sure, so that is below level because it goes down.
right?
What about the visual mitigation? Where I believe there were trees there before all this work started. Those trees were naturally removed, but they haven't come back.
Right, they were what we considered weed trees, a bunch of sumacs and
Sure, so
other
we could,
softwoods that
so.
were very
uh,
unkempt looking.
Right. Well, and they were big and they were giving us a nice character. So is there any way we can get some landscaping back to make this look less dense?
What we have now would be like an open view as you're coming up Woodport Road with no landscaping to deter the view of the trees that are parking lots that are placed along the parking lot by the Delmar building.
Mhm.
You could see through those trees to the beautiful stone building. I would not recommend landscaping too much along that triangular area. There's a septic field there, there's a detention basin, but we certainly could offer some, for sure, yes, to buffer that.
Yeah, that is what I would like to just bring to the attention of the board, that the town has a certain character, and these buildings may be beautiful, but they reduce the amount of natural vegetation that was previously there. I would like us to consider how we can bring it back, that we have a balance of the character of the town against the future that we're going to need. So that is my concern about the landscaping. And by the way, I agree that those 8 spaces that are banked really put a tremendous visual stress on Conestoga Trail. Mr. Dijkstra mentioned that he was not in favor of those 8 spaces for that reason, and I would like to just concur with that. If that is open, then yeah, vegetation, planting's definitely there. So, those are my concerns about, especially along here, that we do as much as possible.
So along Woodport Road and between the intersection and the septic field.
Yeah, here, and since this is available, essentially, do something here in order to preserve the character of Conestoga Trail. That brings me to a traffic question. What is the impact of the additional traffic for this proposed medical building on the traffic flow on Conestoga Trail? Since we have 2 parking areas leading out onto Conestoga Trail, and it suggests that traffic that comes in from 181 has a choice to leave by Conestoga Trail for whatever reason.
This is true, and I would say that as part of the original application, part of our charge was to appeal to DOT because they have jurisdiction of Woodport Road. We had to prove to them that there would be no significant increase in traffic with the expansion, and they did issue us a letter of no interest. So while it is an additional office space, the hourly movements in and out of the parking lot are on the order of 15 to 18 vehicles. So that's not considered significant in the traffic engineering world, and DOT did issue us a letter confirming that.
Okay. Do we know what traffic flow on Conestoga Trail is today?
We've not performed any counts because, again, it's existing, and the proposed building is modest and does not generate what is considered to be a significant amount of traffic. So a formal traffic study was not performed.
No. And so the parking lots have essentially 4 points of ingress and egress 2 on 181 and 2 on Conestoga
That is
Trail.
correct, and because we're not changing them, we don't require any DOT permit.
This one particular lot here in this corner, which is separated from these two connected areas, is that for a specific purpose? Is that where the medical staff would park?
It probably would lend itself best to staff parking, yeah, because you want the visitors to have the prime parking close to the building, and I would think that that would be for overflow parking and/or employee parking.
Because that would reduce traffic movement during the day.
Right, it'd be very low turnover.
I have a question also about sidewalks, possible sidewalks. Sparta has mentioned a number of times that they would like to be a walkable township. And there are sidewalks along many of our streets and roads I should say. And I know that the sidewalks do not extend much beyond that development right behind the bowling alley. It kind of peters out there. Is there any way, since we do have sort of residential needs and we have a sort of accessibility issue, is there any idea that there might be pedestrian access from the town to a facility like this or to a development like this? It may be less practical for this particular medical facility. People will come and go by car. At the same time, the whole issue of walkability has to start somewhere. And if we exclude certain areas from sidewalk, at least potential sidewalk development, we'll never get there. Does the planning board have any overall plan how to expand pedestrian access to the various corners of the township?
Well, I would say the plan endorsement process is being restarted. It's gotten part of the way there. That focuses on the town center, though, not areas up this far. So I would say that that's an opportunity where we're looking to see how well we can connect the town center with sidewalks. How that applies up here, though, it's a little bit distance away, and whether that's desirable and feasible, that's something probably more for, master plan consideration, not at this time.
Right. and
In
that's-
connection with a possible sidewalk development plan would come a tree planting plan.
Which we understand, but unfortunately, in interest of time, this
Oh,
is
okay.
not within the scope of the current hearing, so we'd like to stay on
No-
point.
No plans on this development for any kind of pedestrian?
Not currently, no.
That covers my questions tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Michael Smolowitz. I live on Conestoga Trail.
Michael, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
Yes, I do.
And Michael, please spell your last name.
SMULEWICZ. First name Michael.
Please go ahead.
My question tonight is, as a resident of Conestoga Trail, I have noticed the drainage basin area that right now appears to be a pond. And with two children living in town here a number of years, I'm concerned with safety of a pond there, as well as the breeding of insects and mosquitoes. My understanding, and I just would like this confirmed this evening, is that it will not remain in that state, and it'll be more in line with what the First Hope Bank drainage basin looks like, as well as by the bowling alley here. If somebody tonight could just give me clarification on what it will look like by the end of the project.
Sure, I can answer that. It will, right now, it's acting as a sedimentation basin. Once construction is complete, it'll be converted to an infiltration basin, and it will be a dry basin. So it won't be a pond. It'll have a sand bottom, lawn around the perimeter, and we've been talking about some trees and shrubs around the perimeter as well.
what would I expect during, for example, a rainstorm of an inch or so in a day? Will there be some ponding, or is that system designed to basically eliminate any sort of water in a condition such as that?
It's designed to hold water for a period of time in order to delay the peak discharge from the site. So in a larger rain event, you will see water in that basin. It'll drain over a period of a day or two. Typically, no longer than 3 days is the time you'll see water in it.
Thank you. And just one other question. What will the base of the basin look like? Some of them I've seen are rock nature. I'm not really sure what a sand infiltration system would look like. Could that just be described, please?
The sand bottom is literally it's a concrete sand. So the bottom is a sand material.
I visualize like some sort of a beach sand, but I doubt that that's the case. Is it? Can you describe the texture, please?
It's a little more granular, but it's very similar.
Oh, okay.
Any examples of that around town?
We have a number of them. I'm trying to think. The rock he's speaking of is a decorative alternative that we put on top of it in some places. So that's been done. First Hope Banks, for instance, has a sand bottom and then it has the rocks on top of it. So that was the way that one was designed.
And do we have a termination date, or not termination date, but a date for completion?
It's a function of this building. So
Okay.
once this
So once
building's
it's
done,
finished.
then you tie out the soil conservation approval. And when you do that, you pull you change it over.
So am I correct in understanding that it's going to remain in this state until the completion of the project?
That's correct.
Is there any sort of a remedy for that? Because there's an uncertain timeline as to the completion of this project. Is there a remedy for that in the near future so that it doesn't have to remain so unsightly?
I mean, the time frame is, I don't think it's unreasonable. This will probably be complete within the next, at most, a year. So it's a process. Construction is a process. Unfortunately, in order to protect downstream, you have to utilize the sedimentation basin. So it's protecting the environment doing it this way. So it'll stay in place until the whole site is stabilized.
And I believe one more question. I just want to, I'm sorry, okay. I could go to the First Hope Bank now and inspect that, and that would give me a good idea as to what this 6-inch sand infiltration system is all about.
I think a better one is the one in front of the Biondo building, because First Hope was done prior to the current standards. So that one we just did. It's a couple doors up the street.
And where that is, the Biondo building by Stop and Shop?
Yes.
Okay. I believe I'm done with questions. Thank you.
Mr. Dykstra, is there a way that gentleman's concerns he had two concerns, I think. One was water sitting in there, being like a pond, and being dangerous to children. The second was the appearance. I'm assuming the ponding element of it is less controllable. Is there, in the past, have you been able to shield off, if this does go on for a year, anything visually appealing we could put in temporarily to shield this from the, because it's a residential street right there?
And what we've done in the past, typically, if you do something, it's like a snow fence. It's not visually appealing, but it does provide a separation.
Yeah. Yeah, no other alternatives that you've worked with in the past or can come up with?
I mean, there's lots of alternatives to screen things. It's just a matter at what cost and what's required. You know, it's a balance.
Yeah.
I mean, I think at this point in time, that basin is in a place where they could begin planting around it, and that I think could go a long way to making it more visually appealing.
Okay.
Could the planting be done before it's completed?
Yes, because the
Oh.
bottom is the area that has to be modified.
Oh, okay.
That could be a solution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One last question, I apologize, I'm looking at the plan that we received tonight. I noticed that the EV stalls seem to be further away than I would have expected from the entranceways to the two buildings. So I'm going to look to my professionals to say, is that what's typical, or should they be split between, and closer to the two entryways between the two buildings so they have quicker access if needed, and easier access? And the other question I had is, these are the 9x18s. Is that sufficient for emergency vehicle space?
So the first question was with the EV spaces.
Right,
There's
so-
no regulations as part of the state law. It's really just a calculation of how many are required. There's no design standards for
Where they're located, or?
where they're located, where they have to be. What I don't know if it's possible, but I would recommend maybe that the EV spaces not be open or put on those apps for public consumption, simply because that will attract people to go. If they're driving through Sparta and they need to stop somewhere, the app shows up and tells you there's an EV space you can stop at. And so I would recommend to not have that on there, because so you're going to have people from outside taking up parking spaces next to the EV chargers, waiting their turn or whatever. I think they should be, selected for the site. As far as where they're located, I don't think there's a problem with that. I think, whether they're residents or employees or visitors to the cancer center, patients and family members, I think that they'll find the spaces just fine.
Okay.
If they need to use them. I think the residents also overnight will probably realize if they need to charge their car,
Okay,
they would do
all right,
that. if they
thank
had
you.
electric.
I'd just like to add that, if I may. I don't think the EV spaces are entirely similar to a handicap space, for example, where you want access, as you pointed out, easier access for the patients or someone who has a disability, that you want to get them closer to the building in order to make it easier for them. I'm thinking out loud off the top of my head, the Wawa at Ross's Corner on Route 15 and 206. Their EV stations, they're all Teslas, and they're all in the back of the parking lot, because once they park there, they could be there for an extended period of time during the charging. So rather than use the really prime time parking spaces, they're in the cheap seats, if you will, so they can get charged.
All right, thank you.
And Ron, did you have a second question?
No, I actually answered it with the
okay.
answer you gave me here, so I'm
Sure.
good, thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Dolan, you mentioned earlier that you estimated the increased traffic to be 15 to 18 vehicles per hour. Is that correct? Is that combined Woodport Road and Conestoga? New building, okay. So we don't know the split, obviously, but it could be either, yeah. Yeah.
That's based on my, we've got a state highway and a local road, so there's going to be more traffic on Woodport. Therefore, you would expect more of the increase in traffic to be on North.
And I believe I saw in the last report, or maybe this one, that we don't expect there to be an issue with cut-through traffic because of the configuration of the lots, correct? Okay. Mr. Dunn, two questions. One, can you show us where the HVACs or HVAC unit or units will be located and how they'll be shielded?
Both sides, right? There's going to be a total of 8 HVAC units, 4 on one side and 4 on the other. Landscape plan shows them being screened with boxwood trees, boxwood shrubs on the south side of the building and also on the north side.
Okay. And my second question is a little bit more about the landscaping. So what I heard from the exchange a little earlier, is there an opportunity then, is there no opportunity to add trees along Woodport Road between that large parking lot and Woodport Road? Is that what you, did I hear you correct in the end, that there's no opportunity to put any trees in there?
There is, we could put, I wouldn't put any more than 3 street trees in that area.
Mhm.
With just the knowledge that it's planted on a slope, we have to keep out of the right of way, and there's maintenance issues with that. The trees eventually will grow to overhang both the parking area and the right of way. So, but yes, we could accommodate up to 3, I would think.
Okay. And also, on Lot 7, between the septic field and the basin, I heard that was mentioned earlier too. Would that affect anything with stormwater? Is there an opportunity to put some trees down in there between the field and the basin? Yeah.
So between the proposed detention pond, which is nearly built, and the existing septic, there is a space of what appears to be about 40 feet, and we could put a landscape, I'd call it landscape buffer. We could make it, in this place, I would think it would be appropriate to have it more of a naturalistic flow and plant type, because it's not in such a restricted area.
Sure, sure. And those would be, you think of trees or just a variety of vegetation to make it look a little more natural, or?
I like to see a mixture of heights.
Mhm.
So I would do a mixture of a few deciduous trees, perhaps even a couple of evergreens, and then smaller ornamental trees that would grow to say 16 feet,
Mhm.
just to give it a variety.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Dunn, just to follow up on the landscaping, I didn't have a chance to go through it, the landscaping plan that was approved, but can you confirm, or do you know if the species that were chosen are native to New Jersey?
Um, So, top of my head, I don't know an exact native New Jersey plant list. When I do my planting designs, I do try to lean toward more native and certainly non-invasive species. But I also take into account the market of trees, what's out there at the nurseries. For instance, I specified ginkgo biloba. That's not exactly a New Jersey natural tree, but I think it suits well here. I can take into consideration the fall foliage change, also how messy the trees are or not. So that's how I developed the landscape plan, but I couldn't say exactly if they're all New Jersey natives.
Okay.
Based on the area where the trash enclosure is the garbage pickup going to enter and exit on Conestoga?
It would likely enter off of Woodport and exit on Conestoga just because of the way the turning movements are. It's the natural way that, the angle of that trash enclosure. Correct. Assuming a front-loading, trash, vehicle.
A front-loading trash vehicle, so
Most of them are front-loading, so they'll
lift up
pull it,
the, yeah.
and then they'll back out, and it's the,
When they slam those trash things on the ground, it can get quite noisy. Is there a time limit or window? Considering that the trash enclosure kind of is closer to the Conestoga side?
I mean, this dumpster has been here for a long time. I don't think there's been any issue. It got relocated slightly, but it's always been in that corner.
It's always been in that corner, but that parking lot behind it is all new, right?
Parking lot. This parking lot?
No.
These are all existing parking lots, and they were there prior.
Questions? Ready to move on?
Should I restate my suggested discussion from earlier? So I guess for consideration, We allow the impervious surface variance with the cap on the combined lots of 40. We keep the affordable housing unit in the deed. We allow the less number of parking spaces, so that's 92, including 4 EV ready. We allow this 9 by 18 smaller size spaces. And we add landscaping, so that's native plantings along the slopes and around the basin as soon as possible. And we add trees on lot 7, or vegetation of varying heights on lot 7 between the septic field and the retention basin. And we add 3 trees along Woodport Road in front of that parking lot.
And Councilman Plumetti, if I could, just for clarification. So, and the proposed area for the bank parking will not be used at this time?
Correct, that will stay, what is that currently, grass or
It's grass.
vegetation?
It'll remain.
Yeah, it just stays as grass.
Sounds like it'll be a motion, but Madam Chairman, we did open the witnesses up to some additional
We did,
cross-examination.
and we will
so
open it back
I
to the
think it's
floor.
best to open to the public in case there's anybody who wants to make a final statement or a final cross-examination sort of related to what came up after the last open session.
So any additional questions from the floor on testimony that's been currently provided?
Or additional testimony.
Hi, good evening.
Hi,
Margie
please.
Murphy, 9 Pueblo Parkway.
Margie, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. When did we start this?
About
We're still in the middle
forever.
of testimony for the hearing, so unless this was.
This is the
not- that's-
planning board hearings and zoning board hearings are different from the governing body because they are a hearing. And this is part of the transcript of this applicant's case.
Okay. I just got a question. You don't have any color renderings of the building?
We do not.
Okay, that would help. Also, there's standing water in the front, and I know that was an issue on this past changing, but there is that ditch, and I've been watching all the reconstruction that you've been doing up there. But there is that little gully. Will that change at all? Will there always be water there?
There will not.
There will not. And the parking, you say the garbage has been there, but now you're adding a whole huge new building because have been a hair salon in there, there's a few apartments up. They can't be using that much of the to make the garbage noise as you were bringing out. Now you're putting in a whole huge new building. That's going to make a huge difference.
The trash enclosure for the new building is located right behind the new building. It's not in this location.
But it's going to be closer to Conestoga?
It doesn't exist currently, but it's going to be on the rear of the property, correct?
Close to Conestoga, where there's a lot of houses and the church, that right by there? Going down that road, correct?
There's no church here, but it's off of Conestoga at the end of the parking lot, correct?
That's going to be noisy. Yeah, but it's too bad you don't have any color renderings. That would be nice to see how it does blend in. But thank you.
So, Madam Chairman, if the board might consider a motion. it's up
Sorry.
to- Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
would like
Mr. Mayor.
one more question, please, if I may.
Yes, please state your
Adrian
name.
Learman. I have a question about the building. You showed, Mr. Dykstra, you showed us the elevations. And you mentioned it is a siding exterior. What's the material that will be used for that?
Hardy plank. Hardy plank.
Hardy plank. And for the windows? Will that be vinyl or will that be?
Anderson 400 series, that's a wood window.
Okay. And then one last question about the landscaping. Mr. Blumetti may have asked this, but between the new building and the existing three-story building, that seems to be as squashed together as possible. What will be any kind of sound mitigation from the new building, the proposed building, to the existing building where there are apartments?
There will be no sound mitigation other than the building walls.
Are there any windows on the three-story building facing that side?
I don't know.
I don't know. So what's the distance between those two buildings? It's 30 feet?
30 feet.
30 feet, exactly. And then at the bottom, we have the HVAC units outside the building wall, but facing the three-story building. And those units will be running day and night.
We could theoretically move those forward to the other side of the building if that's an issue.
But there are 4 now, so you would have all 8 on the other side?
Correct. I mean, that's a potential. I'm not offering that, but if that's the issue, yes.
Any windows from the new building facing the existing building?
I'm sorry, I missed your question.
Are there any windows in that wall facing the existing building?
Of the proposed new building?
Yeah.
Yes, this is on that exhibit A2. It shows the right side elevation. Those are the windows.
So those are the windows facing the existing?
Yes.
Existing. And those will those windows be lit up at all after nightfall?
This facility's open 8 to 5, so I would anticipate the lights would be turned off.
Is that required under any kind of ordinance that these lights be turned down or off after nightfall? Do we know?
There's no ordinance to that effect,
It is, okay. And then
but the applicant is offering that, so that's what the
that would be,
restrictions of this resolution will be.
I didn't
based
offer
upon-
that. I said they'll most likely be turned off after they're closed. So I don't want to speak for our CCA and how they,
right, it seems to me that would be otherwise a source possibly of light pollution in that area. And then do I have it correct that there is signage for the facility in that little grass bump out in that front parking lot? Is that signage?
there's an existing monument sign there, correct?
Okay. Will that be lit up at all at night?
I believe it has ground mounted lights. Yes.
All right. Okay, that's it for now. Thank you.
We ready for motion?
Yeah, I do have one question. So,
Please just note, it's almost 9 o'clock. We do have another application, and if you ask that question, we have to reopen it to the floor.
I think it's important.
That's fine.
Mr. Dykstra, the rear parking lot, we talked about lighting on the building and hours of that. The rear parking lot, the lot that's behind a new building closest to Conestoga and the residential dwellings. Do you know, is there a lighting plan for that parking lot to go down after a certain time at night?
It's residential parking, so it stays on all night. It's currently there. It's an existing parking lot for the residences.
Okay. I see. Okay.
Based on the new information, any other questions from the floor, statements from the floor? We welcome the Mr. Devine. That said, are we ready and prepared for a motion?
The board is interested, you can consider a motion to approve the amended site plan and waivers and variances as described this evening with the conditions discussed this evening. The standard conditions, some of the conditions were that the applicant will provide the one deed-restricted very low-income studio unit in the existing building consistent with the COA and UHAC, or Uniform Housing Affordability Control, deed restriction requirements of the state. They will deed restrict the total of both lots to a maximum impervious coverage of 40%. They will prepare a revised landscape plan for review and approval by the board engineer Dave Simmons, which will include the landscaping described earlier, but generally speaking, the addition of native, indigenous, non-invasive species around the stormwater detention basin as soon as possible, and add additional trees along Woodport Road, at least 3, and add a natural landscape planted area with a variety of deciduous trees, evergreens, and small ornamental trees and shrubs in the area between the detention basin and the septic system, as described by Mr. Dunn. And the deed restrictions are subject to the review and approval of the board attorney and the board engineer. Any other?
Madam Chair, if I may make one other suggestion, that my understanding is that the board is also going to adopt the bank parking spaces, if I understand it correctly. And if the bank parking spaces ever did get developed, that the stormwater basin system be evaluated to make sure it either is capable of handling that additional impervious or be modified to accommodate it.
Agreed.
That, by the way, is optional to you. Bank parking, it's a little hard to understand, but basically it means it doesn't get built unless the township or the applicant determine it's needed, such as a situation when there's every single parking space in the lot is full so much of the time that it's needed. I think it's in your discretion to not require the banked parking at all here, and I'll leave that to you. So it might be good if there's a moving party to say, with the bank parking, what that means is the deferral of the present implementation of those parking spaces are granted, subject to a condition that they only be built if required by the township or by the applicant. In this case, your view of the testimony would be what determines whether you even think that condition is necessary. You don't have to require bank parking. We want to let you know that you could, okay? So if the moving party would say with bank parking, that would be, or without, that would help me in crafting the written resolution.
I can make that motion without bank parking. Second.
Councilman Dean Blumetti,
Yes.
Nat Burke,
Yes.
Ron Day,
Yes.
Christine Dunbar,
Yes.
Bill Enright,
Yes.
Angela Cassie,
Yes.
Chairwoman Celeste Luciano,
Yes.
Ernest Reichstad.
Yes.
Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations. Good luck.
Thank you. Madam Chair, thank you, members of the board. Have a good evening.
Luck.
Short recess before the next application. We'll return at 9:07, 5 minutes.
there's
And they've got a photo.
4 lights
Oh,
in
I
4
know
corners,
that.
they'll stay on half power,
Mhm.
you know, so that it's never like.
So that's, I have to remember to like,
it's required.
I can get rid of this. They should just have a trap.
Michelle?
Oh. You don't keep this, right? Oh my God. Trees, the amount of trees.
Brought up, you know,
Okay, I think we're ready to begin hearing. Hi. I think we're ready to begin hearing the capital improvement plan review for Sparta High School and Sparta Middle School solar project.
It's, we're going to restart now, and we're starting with the Sparta Board of Education Capital Improvement Plan Review. And just so the board knows, this is just a capital improvement plan, which means it's a governmental entity coming to this board for a review pursuant to the municipal land use law for capital improvement plans. It is not a site plan or variance. It does not require a board approval. It requires a board review within 35 days of the submission of the capital improvement plan. And what the board does is similar to what you did on the VOTEC, which is review what's being proposed and give advice or advisory comments to the Board of Education, a sister entity, governmental entity of the township. And they can or cannot listen to your recommendation, but often they do. And in this particular case, they're seeking capital improvement plan review of solar energy equipment on the roofs of the high school and the middle school. And they'll explain that. I think also they're going to do some roof coating of one of the school roofs, I've learned today. And they could just explain that they're going to do some roof coating, and that would become part, not necessarily part of what the solar people are doing, but part of the capital improvement plan, so that they don't have to come back at another meeting to talk about a roof coating. So with that being said, we'll swear in anyone who wants to speak for the Board of Ed, and we'll be able to go on to these two, and you can do them both in the same presentation, okay? So please raise your right hands. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? And starting on my right, your left, please state your name and a business address is sufficient.
Nick Wigglesworth, representing Onyx Renewable Partners, 230 Park Avenue, New York, New York.
Joanne Black, Sparta Business Administrator, 18 Mohawk Avenue, Sparta, New Jersey.
Chris Tappan, Supervisor of Buildings and Grounds, Sparta Board of Ed, 18 Mohawk Avenue.
Thank you very much, and please go ahead, whoever would like to speak.
Sure. Should we sit?
If you would like to, yes. It sometimes helps to stand by your plan, and that way you can point to it, but you can do that when you're doing it.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity for the review of our capital improvement plan for the solar at the high school and the middle school. Starting about 2 years ago, we were looking into renewable energies and what we can do to be fiscally responsible for the district and try to save money as much as possible in any which way we can from utilities all the way through. We went out for a RFP, or request for proposal, back in January of 22. It went out in the street on the newspapers for 30 days. We did have a quote-unquote bid opening for it. We had about 5 or 6, I believe it was 6, different solar companies. We reviewed all the bids, and it's basically on the bids, it's basically a dollar amount on per kilowatt hour used. So when we agreed with Onyx was for the high school was 0 cents per kilowatt hour, so which means everything that they generate at the high school is 0. We do not pay for any of that electric. The middle school is a little bit different. We do pay a reduced rate on it. I forget what it is. I believe it's 0.089 cents per kilowatt hour. The high school, basically, it's almost 64% of the energy that's used at the high school will be generated by the solar panels. and it's about 86% at the middle school that will be generated by the solar panels. We then entered an agreement with Onyx through a power purchasing agreement in August of '22. And the term is for 15 years. And after the 15 years, it does give the Board of Ed an opportunity to own the system, or we can have it removed. The net savings through the district from the two buildings over the 15-year term, the high school is a little bit more than $3.5 million savings on electric, and the middle school is a little bit more than $500,000 saving on the electric. Pretty much honestly, in the nuts and bolts of the project, that's pretty much where I can talk about, and if there's any questions, we can turn it over to Mr. Nick, and he can speak to about how the whole system works.
Thank you.
So just one question. So if I understand it right, the high school will be getting its electric at no charge,
Correct.
but the middle school will continue to pay?
Yes.
And why is that? Why is there that difference?
The middle school, there was, Onyx is actually financially helping us with the roof coating of the middle school. So to offset their cost, they couldn't do it at 0%.
Okay.
Or 0 cents per kilowatt hour.
Chris, that's a good segue into the roof coating then, I guess. I just want to make sure you get approval of whatever capital plan that
Sure.
you know about, which we can-
Sure.
So you want to, as part of this, you want to make sure the roof is coated at the middle school before the solar goes onto it. Is that
Yes,
the-
actually, it's happening at both the high school and the middle school. For the solar panels to be installed, we need at least a 15-year roof warranty on it. And the middle school, it's about at the end of its life expectancy. We haven't had a warranty on it in several years. The company went bankrupt and nobody bought out their warranties. So we officially do not have any warranties on the middle school roof. But it is due to be recoated. High school, we were having about 10 years left on the warranty that was currently there. But to give us the 15-year warranty for the panels to be up there, we decided to go ahead and also do a recoating of that roof as well.
So I have a question specifically regarding the high school, before we get into the nitty-gritty. So the high school property that the building's on, the property that the high school is on for that building is actually in the Highlands Preservation Area. So I would like you to comment on that. I would suspect that the NJDEP, the Highlands Council, would have some involvement or some approval in this process. Is that accurate or not?
Because they're a public school or a school in the Highlands Preservation Area, they are benefited by a statutory exemption. There's 18 exemptions and one non-applicability. And one of the exemptions is for schools and for their changes. But also, so they are exempt. They as the Board of Ed, for both, actually only the high schools in the preservation area, I think. So they don't really need anything from anyone other than you, and if they were doing something in a wetlands, but I don't think they are, but they can, I think Nick will explain where they're making any changes to either, both sites. There might be some ground-mounted equipment on the yard of the high school, I think. Well, Nick, they will have to explain. I only know from Dave what he saw on the plants, but, so, certainly relevant that they're located in the preservation area and you can ask questions about it, but they are exempt. And that this is true, like say a high school or a school wanted to build a new building in the preservation area. If they are building a school building, they are exempt.
Well, in this
Whereas a
case,
municipality, it's a strange exemption.
Yeah.
Municipality, if it wants to do DPW, is not exempt, but the school board of ed is exempt. So-
yeah. So I guess I have to ask, so is there a difference, though, if this is not a school building or a school facility or a school
It could
element or
be.
function going up? It's actually a separate
It could be.
for-profit entity that's building something
Oh.
to use that property.
No, not in this case, because in fact, the roof is being used for equipment that benefits the Board of Education in both buildings, and so it is a capital improvement. When you do something to your land or your buildings, even if it's not costing you money, you are using your capital. Actually, when you hire an attorney to do this, you are using your capital. That's the case law on capital improvement plans. It's pretty extreme responsibility to come to you. That is educational based because it is a school. If they were doing something that was not a school at all, there might be some question mark, but this is for a school, and it's not a site plan by a private entity. It's a capital improvement plan. And it is both a capital improvement plan and it is an exemption under the Highlands Act. It's one of the few that is given to governmental entities, but it is given to boards of ed. And private schools, by the way, so.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Rick, you said after the 15 years, you could either own it or remove them. Does that mean that you'd have to purchase it at the end of the 15 years?
Yes,
Okay.
it is purchased at the fair market value at that time.
Are there any tax benefits or rebates for redoing the roof when you install solar panels?
I do not know the answer to that question.
You would think that there would be.
I'm not an expert, but I was looking into it myself, and I don't think that's covered. Sometimes when you use solar roofing material like Tesla or GAF, you can describe a cost of the shingle that is a solar shingle to the subsidy that the federal tax credit gives you.
I think the construction on a new roof is like a 30% tax credit in the state of New Jersey if you add solar panels. No one.
They don't pay taxes, so they probably don't.
Right, but the construction is paid for by taxes.
Yeah, it's interesting.
To see if all of us get a tax credit.
In this case, Nick could probably explain it,
That'd be
but
nice.
probably the solar company is the one that benefits by the tax credits, but I don't, that's their bailiwick, so.
And when is this expected to be completed?
Our goal is to have it completed, high school by the end of the year. And the middle school shortly after that, but it's a little bit contingent upon the roof upgrades that are not happening quite yet, but will happen as soon as that.
I don't know that this is just a question. Right now, the plan obviously is to put it on the roof, but I've seen other school districts do it in the parking lot above the cars where cars are parked. Is there a benefit to that or?
I mean, it's another type of installation,
Ah,
you know, in case we have it on the roof. And I'm not sure if sorry about that. I'm not sure if, carport canopy was thought about in this case.
So in our packet, we have a capital improvement plan for all the schools. Is this something that's being done soon also, or?
That actually came from our long-range facility plan from our architect. That is an overall general spectrum of what needs to be done in all 5 buildings. There is no set time span or limit on any of that. It is as much as we can do every year for our budgets. That's what we try to achieve.
And then you have the roof recoating on the high school, but that would be covered at no cost. Okay.
And Angela, that's a good question, and Chris explained that to me too. He provided that because they do have a long-range capital improvement plan of the Board of Ed. And the statute that they're here under, Section 31 of the Municipal Land Use Law, says in Section B that the Board of Eds of all of New Jersey will come to the planning boards of all of New Jersey and describe their long-range improvement plan to the board and get advisory comments to that. So that is required, and it is good that they're doing that. I mean, it's not, their urgent need is the solar to build them during the summer. But it's good that he provided that to you, and if there was some coordination of planning ideas that could come from them telling you about their long-range plans, the planning board knowing about them and the council knowing about them might allow for some synergies. That, I think that's the idea of that requirement of both the Municipal Land Use Law and the State Educational Facilities Act as well.
Might add, the long-range facility plan also goes down to the Department of Education for review. It's a requirement that the district submit it to the Department of Education as well.
So at the end of 10 years, it sounds like there's two options there. Either you purchase the system or it's removed. In my mind, I'm picturing if the choice was to remove it, maybe picturing this wrong, you know, there's, the roof's going to be in need of repair.
Yeah.
Where does that money come from?
Do you want me to touch on that? The roof will not need to be repaired. It's actually lays on top of the roof.
So it's not bolted in and holes and?
No penetrations at
Okay.
all in the roof. And that is one thing we made sure that everything is, it's a ballast system. So the gravel and the aggregate sit on top of the racking system.
Okay.
So when it is time to remove, or if we do have a roof leak and need to make a repair, we can pull that section of panels off and make the repair.
Again, a long-term agreement, are there any performance bonds or any type of guarantees that says, you know, at the end of 10 years, should Onyx not be able to meet up to its obligation, is there money there that helps pay for the removal, or how does that work?
Yep, so there's an 87.5% performance guarantee.
Great.
And so I believe it's in the PPA, it says we take average of the annual generation over every 3 years. And if we're not hitting that 87.5%, average, we have to compensate the school for that, any lost energy below that. Does that make sense? Did I explain that?
I'm not sure that
Every year we'll estimate how much energy we're gonna generate, and we'll take, in 3-year increments. So we'll take the estimate for year 1, year 2, and year 3 and average that. And if we don't hit 87.5% of that, we'll have to compensate the school for whatever we haven't generated.
So I think my question may have been a little bit different. I apologize if I didn't ask it clearer than I should have. What I'm concerned is, should there be a repair of the system needed throughout the 10 years? Or do you choose the option to remove it? Do we know the money's there? Is there a performance guarantee that says if Onyx is unable to, let's say goes out of business or whatever, that says that money's there so the taxpayer doesn't have to pay for the removal of that system?
So I'm not sure if there's any kind of performance bond posted, but I know in the PPA, if the school does not choose to buy the system after the 15-year term, we have to remove it on our own dollar within 180 days. And then, sorry, the second part of your question?
So I understand that. But what if for some reason Onyx sold to another company or decided it wasn't going to be there? Who pays? I mean, who's going to pay for the removal of the system? Or if there's repairs needed, if Onyx isn't there, is there any type of performance bond or guarantee that says that money's going to be there if it's needed?
I am not sure.
Okay.
On that. Something I can get an answer.
Yeah, and it may be something that you want to look into as well.
I share that concern too. Is it 15 years or 10?
15.
15, okay.
Okay.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
Things change a lot. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
I have just a general question. I have heard that the very expensive inverters start going bad at 10 years, 10 to 15 years. Is that true? I'm just asking that question, and they're very expensive to replace.
I believe our inverters have a 20-year warranty on them. And, it's in our best interest to replace anything that is not working correctly as soon as possible. And so certainly, we're monitoring it all the time, through the computer. And so if an inverter is not working properly at any time, that will be replaced.
I'm assuming that you've seen the reports from the Environmental Commission and also from Mr. Simmons, our engineer for the planning board. So there's a number of questions in those documents. Will you be addressing those individually? Should I go through those questions now? Do you want to go through some more details? I think you were about to speak before.
We haven't finished the
Yeah,
testimony
yeah,
yet.
yeah. So if you'd like to finish first, you can, and then we can go through the questions. Okay.
Then you can
Yeah,
speak.
okay. So I'll just review these. I'm not sure if you've seen these reports lately. I won't go through it in every line. From the Environmental Commission, both of these locations are in pretty environmentally sensitive spots. We already talked about the high school being in the preservation zone for the Highlands. For instance, the high school property where the school is, not across the street, so excluding the fields, there's about 1,500 feet of a C1 stream. Almost 70% of the lot is a riparian area. Over 60% of the lot is critical wildlife habitat. It's a prime groundwater recharge area and 15% of it. And also 100% of the lot is in a wellhead protection area. And that's based on the NJDEP Highlands Council, ERI. So I say that, and actually for the middle school, somewhat similar. There is 9,000 feet because the Wallkill River at that point spreads out, as you know, if you've been there, I'm sure some of you, of a C1 stream. And 50% of that lot is a riparian area. 55% of it is a critical wildlife habitat with a number of endangered, threatened, and species of special concern, including the bog turtle, the wood turtle, and I don't want to list all of them, but there's probably a dozen. And also, it's obviously a prime groundwater recharge area as well for almost 30%. So that's kind of the setting for these two lots. So they are very, very sensitive environmentally where they sit. So although this is not a new building going up and you're not breaking ground, there are some questions and concerns that the commission had that we'd like to just ask you to comment on. One of them is, can you confirm that there's no hazardous materials that will be used during installation, maintenance, cleaning, operations, disassembly? So the whole life cycle from, when you start to 15 years and, 100 days from now.
Yes, there will be nothing, hazardous that will be used as any part of this.
No hazardous materials or liquids, nothing at all in the whole lifespan? Okay. I'm not sure if it applies to this type of system, but will large amounts of water be needed for this operation, this process? No. What happens at the end of life if the school does not purchase them? Or either way, at the end of life, it's very important to recycle solar panels properly. And I know that's an evolving practice. How are these, can you confirm how they will be recycled properly at the end of their life?
I cannot confirm exactly how they will be recycled. As you mentioned, that's something that's kind of evolving and kind of new area that I think is being worked on a lot in this industry. I can't tell you exactly how they will be recycled or what will happen to them after. But I'm happy to ask and to give a better answer on that.
Do you have any current examples from today, present time, where you are actually at end of life for any panels that you're recycling and how that's accomplished?
So Onyx, we're about 10 years old,
Mhm.
and so we actually have not encountered that yet, to my knowledge. So I can't give you an example.
Okay, is there a commitment to recycling them properly at the end? If you can't describe how it will be done, is there a commitment that Onyx properly and responsibly recycles?
Yeah, I think certainly. I mean, we are an environmentally conscious group, and we'll, while I can't tell you exactly how we will do it, I can assure you that, we'll make sure that they are, recycled or, taken, removed and properly disposed of or recycled.
Mhm.
Certainly.
Okay.
I wonder if there's a best practices, I don't know,
Industry.
process or whatever. for
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
Hmm.
Will there be any particulate matter or other pollutants that are released into the air from any of the operations, either assembly or operations of the unit on a regular basis?
No,
No airborne pollutants? Okay. And will the installation and will the presence of this on the roof affect the drainage of stormwater, snow melt, other,
no.
in any
That
way?
wouldn't change the drainage of the roof.
Okay,
whatsoever.
okay. So that was the, thank you for that, I appreciate it. That was the Environmental Commission questions on the two sites. I don't know, Mr. Simmons, if you would, I know there's a number of questions in your report. I don't know if you want to have them answer them specifically or certain ones that,
If I may make a suggestion to the board, I did prepare separate reports once the plans were submitted on both the middle school and the high school. They're both very similar because they're roof-mounted installations. If it'd be all right with the chair lady, if I could go through that briefly just to get some of the answers, if that's all right? Okay. Again, going through the zoning on both, they're in the OSGU zone. There's no new buildings proposed, so there's not an offset setback issue or anything like that. And the applicant indicated they're using the ballast method, no penetrations through the roof, so that explained that one. One question I had was, and again, when I was out to the high school or the middle school going around it, I know there's other mechanical equipment up on the roof. Depending on the angle and which school you're talking about, how much additional height do you think is going to be added on each panel roughly?
I'd say about 12 inches, about a foot, maybe, 12 to 18 inches, not much.
Not much, only approximately a foot.
Correct. Yeah, they're
Okay.
going to be, right at the roof level.
So from what I saw visually in comparison to the other mechanical equipment on the roof, it's going to be far less than that.
Certainly.
Okay. And when I was out at the high school, I noticed you were having some stone or whatever blown up on the top to reseal the roof. So I see that was underway. As far as any structural improvements, are there anything required for the roof, or that's already been evaluated?
Nothing, no structural upgrades or anything that has been evaluated and stamped by our structural engineer.
Okay. With regards to the high school, I know there's a small area down on the front right corner where you're going to have some electrical control panels and what have you. Is there any additional lighting going there just in case there's maintenance needed at night or?
That is something that we can certainly do. I don't know if it's included on the plans now, but definitely something we could add if it's not already there.
What I'd suggest is just anything that's required by code for the construction official. With regards to utilities, they're not using any water. They're not having an impact on the septic system. The one question I had, and maybe I confused this, the applicant to advise if the high school and by the same token, the middle school will be purchasing any or all the power, or will some of the power be sold back to, and I thought it said someplace, either the JCP&L and or the state of New Jersey. Could you elaborate on that?
Yep. So yeah, so the way the project is basically funded for us is by selling the power through the New Jersey incentive program, which is called the SUSE program. And so they value every megawatt hour of energy that we generate at a certain, dollar amount. And so that's how we're able to fund the project.
So the schools will use some, but other will go to JCP&L?
So all the energy that we generate will be sold to the New Jersey BPU incentive program called the SUSE program. And it will be fed through the school's meter. So they're not actually going to use the direct energy. We're offsetting their meter. And so that they're not, when they get their electric bill, they'll see, what do we have? 86% for the middle school, 64% for the high school, less. Mike, does that make sense?
But then, by your power purchase agreement, the school receives, in the case of the high school, its electricity for free.
Yep.
Up to what it used, right? And so it's not quite a net zero program, it's a program of you're generating electricity, the school's getting 100%, and the high school, 100%, in the middle school, because of the arrangement that was made, slightly less than 100%. But that is the program that you will be using and that the Board of Ed benefits by.
Correct. Okay. That's why we're able to, offer them the $0, electric rate, is because we're getting money
More
from-
revenue, right?
So may I ask a question? Say that in 15 years, the school decides to purchase it, then whatever additional power they generate, they can get that funding,
Yeah.
from Jersey or from JCP&L, okay?
Probably up to net zero, though, because net zero is the system that works for you when you own your own and you seek to take advantage of solar, you are limited to the benefit of your energy cost.
So then you don't get,
What you generate over your need is not something you get revenue for. If you do, it's a very modest revenue that's based on
for
wholesale.
them, but not for the school, okay.
But the incentive program that they're operating under gives them the incentive to do this by getting the ability to generate and receive more revenue than what the school needed.
Got it.
Basically, the roof space becomes something they lease.
Thank you.
With regards to signage, you've got a whole sheet number 12 on the signage plan for warning signs and what have you. Just as a general rule, I know that'll go in different places by your inverters or by the panels themselves. 12 by 12 or any particular size that's required for that signage?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. But I can let you know.
Fair to say whatever size code requires, that's what you'll install?
Exactly, yes.
There wasn't an environmental impact statement, but I did read on the information on the inverters, correct me if I'm wrong, it was kind of small to read, but it looked like during the day, it generated a noise of about 65 decibels. Does that sound about right?
Yep, yeah, there'll be like a slight hum.
But during the night, when it's not operating, it dropped down to zero?
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
that'll be nothing.
So you'll meet all DEP and township requirements as far as noise limitations.
Certainly.
The one detail you had for a chain link fence, I just recommend a bottom rail versus a tension wire on the bottom. It just seems to be more sturdy, if you will. And I know you need approval from the township construction official for the various permits. The one thing we've seen in some other municipalities with regards to the solar farms and what have you, this is similar to it. There was some concerns from the emergency groups, fire departments and what have you. Once those panels are energized, if God forbid they had a fire or something was going awry, how would they de-energize that and that to work and contain the fire safely? Upon the installation of everything, would you folks be willing to provide training and information to the local first responders and fire department in order to help them know how to
Certainly.
respond to any problem?
Certainly.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, yeah.
And the other thing I didn't have in the report, and I know over in Hampton by Tractor Supply on 206, they did this. God forbid that somebody's up there working on one of the panels and they fell, broke their leg, become incapacitated, whatever. Have you ever seen an installation where, for example, because there's a lot of panels in what you're doing, you labeled the rows, row A, column 6, whatever it might be. So if someone was down and called on their cell phone and they're lying down and they can't be seen because of all the panels, the first responders would know where to go to find them. Any kind of designation you could put on there about that?
Row specific, I'm not.
Or area of the roof, anything to
Certainly,
help them
you know,
find it.
sections of the roof, I feel like
you know.
Just so if they were lying on the roof, God forbid incapacitated, they wouldn't have to go over the entire roof, which is a big roof in those cases, just to help them zoom in on where they needed help.
Yeah, I think certainly, yeah.
Those are my comments, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I just have a question. So the life of this agreement is 15 years and the warranty is for 20. So if the school decides to purchase, they're only covered for 5 additional years. So what is the school's plan if after that 20-year shelf life, things go sideways?
That all depends on the power output and everything what's happening. If the power output is still generating what we think it should be generating, then we will repair it and keep moving forward. If it is at that point in stage of its life, or it is 20 years goes by and it's done, we will make a plan and have it removed and recycled.
Would it be safe to say with the way solar keeps, technology keeps improving, that 15 years is probably a better system out there?
Yes.
Probably a good possibility.
It's something you would have to, yes, we have to cross that bridge when we get to there at that point in time and see what the system's generating and what would be fiscally responsible for us to do.
That kind of leads into my next question. What if in the next 5 years, technology increases, exponentially? Is there any recourse on your side to have Onyx upgrade the system? Is there anything built in to what you're doing?
I believe Nick can help me on this one. I believe we're locked into a 15-year contract with them.
Yeah, we're 15-year contract, who knows what will happen in 5 years.
Based on current equipment.
Based on current equipment, and it's in our best interest to have the system operating as efficiently and as best as we can. So if there was, theoretically, if there was something that was 30 times better than it is now in 5 years, maybe we would think about that ourselves, but there's nothing, written into the contract to address that.
They're a mutual out. In other words, if something like that does happen, is there something in there that says you can mutually agree to redo the contract with new equipment?
I don't think there is. I don't think there is. But again, I don't know how much better, the school can get with, having free electricity for the next 15 years. Yeah.
So I have a question. The middle school has a solar array in front of it, right? How does the rooftop system interact with, compensate? I'm assuming the power from the panels that are out there in front of the school today are providing a benefit. How does that work with the new rooftop system?
They're two separate entities. Basically, with the solar, just like how we're doing the new system, the solar generates and refeeds the grid. We don't have any storage banks or storage batteries, and we use the actual energy generated from the panels. Everything gets sold back to the grid. The ground mount, and the main difference, I'm happy you brought this up, the main difference of this, the ground mount, we didn't control any of the terms. It was pushed out to everybody from the county, from Morris County to Sussex County, and we didn't have any chance to go back and forth with the terms. This one, yes, we do. This one, we controlled all the terms, and that's why it took us 10 months to complete a contract between both parties and the attorneys and all of that. That it is the benefit. This is the best benefit we can do.
Another question, does having this type of system of this scale and magnitude on the roof change the liability insurance or any types of other building insurance requirements?
We do disclose to the insurance company that we are doing this project, of course, and as part of the annual review and the proposal and quote, they do review the buildings and whatever capital improvements we may do.
Has it increased premiums or costs to the school system?
Not at this point, because we haven't installed it.
Okay. Do you suspect it might next year or on an ongoing basis for either building insurance or liability or?
Yes.
Okay. And did you have an opportunity to incorporate that into the cost benefit for the deal? The increased insurance costs?
Well, I was here after the deal really was, built together. So I can't speak to that specifically.
Okay.
But what I could say is that, it is reviewed with the insurance company every year. So, we will be disclosing any kind of the capital improvements that way.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question, a very general question. How does this project compare to, say, a community solar project where the whole community could benefit from all of those kilowatts being generated, rather than settling for $3.5 million at the high school and $500,000 at the middle school, but to have the whole community benefit from this?
So community solar farm, the way that works, as you're saying, it would allow, it wouldn't just be Sparta, it would be anyone in JCP&L territory would be able to, purchase, basically subscribe to the farm and likely receive a 10 or 15% discount. I'm not sure what the NJBPU has in their program. But it's a totally different, structure of a project and, it's a different kind. And I don't think it was evaluated for this particular one. This was, supposed to be a direct benefit for the school system.
But it would have been possible for you to do this, to set up a community solar farm using the rooftops of the schools so that our whole entire community that subscribe to it would get 10, 15, 20% discount on everybody's electric bills.
Yes, that could have been possible, but there again, this was budget driven from the school's budget and to see how we can reduce the actual school's budget, which in turn reduces the taxpayer levy.
And again, it wouldn't be just, the township of Sparta. Obviously, it could be promoted to the township of Sparta, but, anyone in the JCP&L territory would be able to be a part of, a theoretical community solar project on the school.
Thank you.
Just following up on Mr. Simmons' point. So it sounds like you're willing to do some training for the fire department, but has the fire department actually looked at this application or this design and weighed in whether or not they have any concerns with not being able to fight a fire with a flat roof because you're going to have the slopes? Have they given you any feedback one way or the other?
We got feedback from the fire subcode inspector, Joe Serecchia. I have not spoken directly with the fire department, but he did have a couple of comments on the plans that we addressed and got back to him on Monday.
So, Mr. Simmons, I'm not sure. So normally we get with these packages, some type of a statement from the fire official. Would that be the fire official, or is this something that we could recommend that they provide the designs to the fire official?
I would suggest that be a recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
From the standpoint that I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you spoke with the fire subcode official, one of the emails I saw that went back and forth was they were concerned what the percentage of roof coverage was that they had to address. There may be a limit under the codes on that. But the second thing is, again, with the fire department and what have you, as far as them getting training and any concerns they may have as far as, hey, we have to access this one particular crucial part of the roof. Maybe that's not a good area for the panels. I'm not saying that's the case, but
Right.
something like that might be a
Be
concern
worthwhile at least
of how they
letting
were
them have.
going to fight a
yeah.
fire.
Yep.
God forbid it happened at one of the schools without the solar panels. They may want to bring that to your attention.
Thank you.
Sometimes, Nick, also the fire department seek a knockbox or access method that's near any locked gates, and turn-off switch for the DC power so that it's automatically turned off before anybody's doing anything near them because of the risk. Is that something that you think is either built into the plans or can be built into the
It
plans?
is on the plans. I can point it out to you. It's in the top left corner here. Knox box and the shut-off switch will be right there at ground level. And the fire department will have a key to that, obviously. So should they need to come shut it down, they will be able to.
Okay, and something similar at the middle school?
Same exact thing.
Okay. Thank you.
Is construction going to disrupt any, like, day-to-day school activities? Students are not going to be impacted, no.
Nope, for the high school, this summer, we're hoping to get all the heavy stuff done and lifted on the roof and all the major construction done before September 1st. And then maybe a little electrical work done, pulling wires and stuff during the day. When we get to the middle school, we did talk to Nick about second shift. When school is out of session, they can work.
I have a question. I'm going to say it's a science question, so I'm going to look for education more than. So does this type of operation at this scale create any interference with computer systems, science lab equipment, anything like that because of the proximity to capturing and processing whatever has to happen on the roof to get it out of the area?
I do not believe so. No. Would be, yeah, I don't think so. Never heard of that happening with any other rooftop system. So.
I have a question. The middle school already has solar panels, don't they?
Yes.
Is it the same company?
No.
It's not. And how do they work together? They're separate, completely separate?
Two separate entities.
Any other questions from the dais? Okay, let us open it to the floor. Any questions from the public?
Well, technically not for this hearing, Mike. So do you swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Please go ahead.
I don't know what the measure of efficiency is of these systems, but I would imagine you're competitive, whatever the highest transfer efficiency is, if that's the right term. I'm not sure there's much room in the technology to get any higher efficiency. That's kind of beside the point. I know there's panels on, I guess it's at the Votech on White Lake Road. Is that part of the Sparta district? I assume it is, right?
No, that's the county, but, yeah, that's the county's
I had the sense that
superintendent.
when that installation went in, there was some disappointment, and I could be wrong, and I'm not sure what aspects of it. But if that didn't turn out as expected, have we looked at that and have some sense of what to do differently in order to avoid those problems?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely. The main thing was the rates.
okay.
The rates through that program was not the greatest,
All right, so we've benefited from that experience?
very much
I
so.
assume these are fixed orientation panels, they don't change during the transit of the sky and so forth? As far as visual appearance from the road, is it aesthetically acceptable? How do you characterize the changed appearance?
I think, again, they'll be, they'll add no more than about a foot to the roof. And, compared to the HVACs and the different levels of the roof up there, it really won't look much different at all. It will not change. There will be.
Last question, when all this money you're saving, when will the tax rate go down? Good luck.
Sir, please raise your right hand. Do you swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Please state your name and address.
Mark Scott, 9 Pueblo Parkway. Just a couple quick questions. So your company, Onyx, you're going to receive the revenue from the sale of the power at night, or the sale of the excess power, I'm sorry, that probably not too much power at night, but okay. And you also receive the ERGs, you receive all the tax credits, you receive all those, and you monetize those, that's how you make your money. You know how many kilowatt hours per year that high school use, or the middle school uses? I was just trying to figure out the math as to how you got your savings, because we're paying 8.9 cents per kilowatt hour, right?
For the middle school, correct? Yeah.
Right, and like the best price we could possibly get is probably 11 to 12 cents per kilowatt hour. So the delta there is like 2 or 3 cents.
Savings were based on what was provided in the RFP, and I believe that was 11.7 cents, escalating 2.2% a year.
Okay. I don't know if you're aware, but we're quickly urbanizing our town. And when we decide to expand the high school again, how will we go up or go sideways with the building and not disturb your solar panels? Or what happens then? Do you come and move it for us? What happens? Or are we responsible?
For moving the system? Or for
Well, sure. I mean, what happens if we if we want to expand our high school and we want to go up, what happens? Who's responsible to move that system?
I think, if we'd have to, I'm not sure, I don't know how to answer that question. If, there were, add-ons and additions that significantly impacted the production of the system, that would negatively, impact both us and the school.
Right.
From a solar perspective.
Right.
So, I'm not sure.
Okay, so I guess the school board would have to make sure that we're not going to expand for the next 15 years if we're going to lock into this contract, right? I don't know who I'm speaking to when I say that. I don't know. Is there a representative of the school board here?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thanks. Over 80% of all solar panels in the world are made in China. And 20% are, a rapidly growing amount are being made in America. Is there any way you can assure us that these solar panels will come from American sources?
They are, let's see, they're Trina modules. I do not believe they're made here.
Do we care about that?
Yeah.
I think we do, don't we?
We do.
Okay, can you get us an answer as to where they're made? Thank you. Who ensures the performance guarantee that you were speaking of, that 87%? Who ensures that? Is there a third party, AIG, or some other insurer, or is it just the credit of your company? Okay. Who insures the solar panels? The high school or you? Well, I mean, if there's a fire and they burn and they're gone, who pays for that? Or whose insurance company is responsible for that?
I can give you an answer to that.
Okay. Because as I'm sure many of you are aware, insurance costs are escalating at a record pace right now in the real estate industry. Also, who removes the system at the end of its life? I understand solar panels last about 20 years, 25 years, okay? Our contract is 15 years, right? Solar panels are extremely toxic, right? Because they're made of so many metals that are fused together. Who's responsible for removing that? It would be ours. It would be the school systems, correct?
At the end of so there's a 15-year term.
Right.
And, at the end of, let's say at the end of the 15-year term, should it buy it, then they take responsibility. Then we are responsible to remove it within 180 days.
Okay. And this goes to Dean's point, if there's a fire, right? If there's a fire, let's remember that these solar panels are sitting on top of an aquifer, correct? Similar to like the Germany Flats aquifer where we're building a huge warehouse. But the question is there any, how do we know that in a fire that these toxic chemicals that are in solar panels, and I'm sure there's toxic chemicals in the roof materials also and other things, but do we know anything about the runoff, how they're handled in a fire situation, how they're handled?
Yeah, they're, God forbid there's a fire. There's a whole lot of other problems that will occur if there's a fire, because of the panels. I think it's a technology that can be trusted. It's used all over the place.
Does it sit on an aquifer? Dean?
I'm not certain. I mean, I don't think, it's not the Germany Flats one, I don't believe. It's too far over, but
Okay.
I'm sure there's, I mean, it's.
Right next to the Walkill River.
Yeah, it's right next to the river. It's in the riparian area. It's right near a C1
Surface.
stream.
Surface water more
Yeah.
than aquifer.
Yeah. Oh, it's a wellhead protection area, so it's,
I don't have any further questions. I just thought these might be questions that people wanted to look into.
yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question. When they're removed, say that you're going to remove them after the 15 years, are you going to make sure that the school is hooked up to receive energy from the mains?
Certainly.
Okay, so you wouldn't have that additional expense then? The school wouldn't? You would take care of that for the school?
Correct. Everything will be fully restored to its original condition.
How often do these systems catch on fire? Or is there a problem?
I don't have a statistic for that. I don't think very often at all. They're used everywhere,
Could you provide that information? Because very often makes me get the jitters. Very often isn't good enough when you're talking about a school, right? We want to make sure that it's like 1 in a billion, right?
I can certainly look for a credible statistic on how frequently these systems catch on fire.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No questions? Additional questions from the floor?
Chris, anything further you wanted to add for the Board of Ed? Okay. So if the board would entertain it, it's a motion to confirm that you reviewed the capital improvement plan of the Board of Ed for the, well, I want to forget the roof, roof repair and the two solar projects on the high school and on the middle school, with the comments being that recommend you follow the recommendations of Mr. Simmons's review report, the fire subcode official, and in the future, the fire department, and that you provide training to the fire department and the first responders for how to address emergency situations, and the knock box, show them the knock box and the turn-off switch at the two switches at the two schools. And I think they've commented tonight to try to find some way to identify the areas of the roof, on the roofs, and in a map that the fire officials, fire people could use to know where to orient their activity in the event of an emergency. And I think that's all I have, but the board may have more. Is there such a motion that could be added on to?
Mr. Collins, again, just so Mr. Collins, if I can, one question to make sure that I understand. So when we vote, it's not so much as approval as it is that we had the opportunity to comment.
That's right.
Okay.
You're reviewing per the municipal land use law, which is a advisory review, not a site plan or subdivision or variance. You have no authority to deny a governmental agency their capital improvement plan, but you do have the ability to comment and advise.
Okay.
They're also giving you information about their 5-year capital improvement plan, which is useful and helpful. And so that's part of this motion as well. And they can come back at any time with any other capital project that they would like to do. So it's a review of a capital improvement plan. And you have 35 days to do it from the date that it was provided.
Will we get responses?
I think you'll get them in writing, but they will not be before you act because we don't have another meeting within the 35 days.
Okay.
Nick, you'll get answers to the extent you can to those questions. Right.
So, I mean, just to be clear, if he comes back and says that they're all made in China and we don't like
I
that,
have
there's
yeah,
no
we
authority,
have no
okay.
authority to direct the Board of Ed
Gotcha.
to take any.
So we can just ask the question and
For argument's sake, we don't get a response to any of those questions.
we
have no
can,
ability to say.
gotcha. Okay.
So, I mean, that this is.
Please, sir, you're out of order and you're not eligible to speak now.
So in terms of a recommendation, could we ask that you look at the sources and prefer US where available, as opposed to, China or other countries?
You can ask,
We
but the
can
Board of
ask,
Ed
but
will
it's
determine what. it
Right,
wants to do.
okay, but at least it's
Of
it's
that
commented.
happening.
Good to ask
I
and
mean,
recommend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
we can ask.
Yeah.
Is that something that we're looking to include in motion?
I'd make a motion, we'd like to at least have them look into that, where possible, and where it doesn't, put the whole program on a reasonable tilt.
Prepared to make a motion?
Well, I'll make it. Well,
So
I'll
that-
second Ron's if that's a motion on the
Yeah,
floor,
a
but okay.
motion.
Okay.
Yeah. But, yeah, and
So
then,
Ron's motion to also to include the request for
yeah.
American-made as
Hmm. Yep.
available
Who should I direct answers of these questions to?
to myself.
To the Celeste Luciano, the chairwoman of the Sparta Planning Board. It's to, and the board, but it's to Celeste. So there's a motion, a second, and I've added the recommendation that the Board of Ed acquire the solar panels from United States manufacturers.
Are we ready for a roll call?
Do we have a second? Okay, so Dean, you seconded?
I second.
Yes, okay, yes, then we're ready for a roll.
Councilman Dean Blumetti,
Yes.
Jeanette Burke,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Ron Day,
Yes?
Christine Dunbar,
Yes.
Bill Enright,
Yes.
Angela Cassie,
Yes.
Chairwoman Celeste Luciano,
Yes.
Ernest Ragsdale.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
and
you.
Information, and we look forward to getting some answers to those questions.
Thank you.
Now, to move on, we may have some updates. Let's start with the council. Councilman Blumetti?
Thank you. Quick update from the town council meeting on June 13th. Just two points. Tammy Horsfield gave a presentation on the Sussex County tourism. And what I heard loud and clear is that much of our attractiveness and our success is based on our character of our county and, of course, Sparta. our way of life, and especially our natural resources and the outdoors. That was repeated over and over again during her presentation. And then the only other update is logistics, housekeeping. The town council meetings are changing their start time. It was passed. They'll be starting at 7:00 PM, not 7:30, and that becomes effective on July 11th going forward. And that concludes my update.
Okay, great. Ms. Dunbar, anything from?
Yes,
Environment?
I'll make it brief. The Environmental Commission is focused at this time on a upcoming resolution for plantings, native plants in particular. So they're working on that. And the other thing that we are starting to consider and work on to help the planning board with its master plan is to develop an open space plan.
Oh, perfect. That's great. And Mr. Day, any updates from the subcommittees?
No update on the ordinance subcommittee, but relative to the site, minor site plan waiver. So to date, we've received 25 applications. Actually, we just received another one, so 26. But we have acted on all 25 applications, so we have one open at this point.
Okay, great.
If I can add one more comment, it kind of ties together a bunch of the committees and boards. As mentioned prior, there will be a special joint meeting between the town council, the planning board, and the environmental commission. It won't be a working meeting per se, but it'll be a meeting with representatives from the Highlands Council.
Yes, you
That'll
stole
be-
my thunder.
July 18th, 7:00 PM right here.
Yes, actually, July 18th, 7 PM. And the purpose of the meeting is to have a presentation from the Highlands Council that the focus is going to be on water quality and management. Once we had updates, now if there's any other board business, which I don't think there is, I don't want to speak for everyone. Okay. We're going to open the floor to public comments and questions that are not on the agenda. I was originally going to limit it for time, but since there are so few of us left, we might be able to move through it reasonably quick.
I apologize for my attire, but I just came from ski once practice, so
I love your shirt.
thank you. And it's true. I swear. Margie Murphy, 9 Pueblo. Do I need to swear in again?
We're not in a hearing now.
Oh, okay. I had a comment on the Sparta Land Company LLC that was
We
postponed.
can't talk about that tonight, but it was carried to July 19th at 7 PM here. And you,
July 21st or 19th?
And 19th, I apologize.
A
I did
mistake
say in
on
the
the
beginning of the meeting that there was an error on the agenda. It was
Oh.
carried to the 19th.
Well, I was late, so I'm sorry. Okay.
no problem, but it really will only be heard or start to be heard on that night, and because the applicant isn't here and we carried the case, it can't be talked about tonight.
Can I talk? And
No,
I can't say a word.
cannot.
I'm not asking for
we cannot.
comment.
It doesn't matter. You cannot talk about a pending application that is not on the agenda tonight, except in the hearing on that application, which is definitely scheduled now for July 19th. And you should appear on July 19th.
So I can't make a comment at all.
No, you
Okay.
cannot comment about an application outside the hearing. The board can't be talking about an application.
Right.
Well, no, I'm not
Tom,
asking you
can
to
I
talk.
clarify?
Pardon me?
No, actually.
The answer is
I'm
no.
I'm just asking a question, please. Seeing as though there are going to be multiple comments probably about things that we are not going to comment on, and I think the public is well aware of certain things that we're not going to comment on, because we can't comment on anything that's not in a hearing. But the public can make a statement as to whatever they choose to make the statement regarding. So if you'd like to make a statement, we welcome the statement, we want to hear the statement, but please understand that we can't respond.
Oh, I totally understand that. I want to make a statement.
That's
No, I am not asking questions. I am very, very concerned, and along with all of the residents that showed up last November that came out in force to oppose this thing we are not talking about this evening. And it was a proposed warehouse, but actually was more of like a truck terminal. But the ordinances were changed, and there are multiple paths that we could all take that will result in possibly changing this. One, the planning board could say we changed our mind. There's a new ordinance in place with new specifications in that zone. And the taxpayers and the voters have clearly shown us this is not what we want. And I am so thrilled that we are going to have an open space committee. That is huge. This is very, very emotional for me. My family moved here in the 40s because it is open space. They moved from Brooklyn because that's what they wanted to be. And I'm sorry, Mr. Collins, I didn't mean to step on anything by saying I'm not asking questions, okay? So that's why I wanted to say this. And as you said, so that's one thing. The application will now have to come in with new criteria. And, number two, as you stated, Mr. Collins, that the original application has been substantially
talked about-
revised.
I-
I'm not asking
I
you
only
to say.
talked about, ma'am, you,
Can you look at
you
me,
started
please?
let's go over what you started to talk about.
Yes.
You started to talk about Sparta Land Company. Sparta Land Company is not Diamond Chip Warehouse. Sparta Land Company is a sign on House's Corner Road.
Well, then I made my mistake.
I'm sorry that we're misunderstanding each other, but the case that was carried to July 19th, not July 21st, is not the warehouse. So
I thought the warehouse was,
that's
so that
not
was
yet.
supposed
It's
to be.
not yet on
tonight.
it. No, it is not
I
yet.
don't know where you got that information. The warehouse is, right now, that application is under review for completeness. That won't be on our agenda until after it's deemed complete and reviewed.
So okay, then my mistake on that. Okay, I'd still like to get my comment out, but I was wondering why this name had changed, Sparta Land Company. Okay, that's about a sign?
Correct.
Okay, that's good to know. But I apologize, I was misinformed. But the statement that I want to make that we do have choices. And it has been substantially changed from what they had brought to what we've seen in upcoming or possible presentations that they have to change it. And it's been revised, so we've heard. Now, we could also send this application back to the planning board, back to the zoning, it's at the planning board, send it back to the zoning board where it should be heard, as the applicant's own engineer acknowledged that the subject property meets all the requirements to be defined as a truck terminal. This application has never been adequately heard by the zoning board. In fact, those opposing the application in the name of the people of Sparta has never been heard fully. And it's just, this is the reason the zoning board is now being sued. So the opposition's right of free speech was taken away by the previous zoning board chairman. Let's stand back, send it back to the zoning board, and let's make these revisions where they should be made to protect all of us from this possible monstrosity that is going to ruin our town. The trucking terminal is the applicant's engineer even acknowledged by mistake, or is it a warehouse? I just, and then the point that was brought up by the solar panels, the fire department, I don't know if they were ever brought in, but that's huge. That's a very, very good point, and I commend you all for doing that. Thank you for all you do. I just want this to be done correctly and not have what we have had prior before us in this application. So I will be back, of course, when that comes through, and I apologize for my mistake.
Not a problem. We hear you.
Thank you.
We appreciate your comments. We do hear you.
Thank you.
Jenny Derricks, Tappan to Sparta. I'm going to also ask questions that you're not going to respond to. I don't anticipate responses. Where is the litigation in terms of, is it in a phase where it's being reviewed? There have been I'm talking about the litigation of Anand Dash versus Township, Planning Board, Zoning Board, and Diamond Chip. There were applications for dismissals that have been overturned, and that's my understanding of where we are. The two applications for dismissals were overturned. I'm not asking for,
Oh, this is litigation. It's just public record, the case is pending at the appellate division, and briefs have been filed by the appellant, non-dash, and briefs will be filed by all respondents, I think by July 13th or something around that date. So that's the status of litigation. It's in the appellate division, and the appellate division will schedule it as it deems appropriate.
okay, thank you. To that end, is Sparta Planning Board intending to continue as a respondent, or is there any discussion? Again, this is not a question that I'm expecting an answer to. Is there,
There's no way to not be a respondent.
There's
when
no
when
way
you're being sued.
to ask for a settlement?
The way you can ask, but
Has that-
we're willing to settle if someone else is willing to settle, and that everybody knows that. So but that's not
Well,
very,
everybody
that's not
knows
very
that.
likely.
Has that
Every
been-
attorney knows that. So any attorney who would like to offer a settlement can offer a settlement, and the other attorneys will communicate that settlement back to their party. So
Has the question been asked from the
no,
planning
it
board?
has not been asked by anyone,
Thank you.
as far as I know, by any attorneys. No, we're not suing ourselves. No, we're not.
Any other questions or comments from the floor? You're welcome to approach the microphone. Okay, one last thing I actually would like to mention. I should have mentioned it under other board business. But since we had discussed the master plan in previous meetings, and we had mentioned that we were still in the information gathering phase. As it stands right now, we are currently working toward, getting together for plan endorsement. As mentioned, we do have the meeting with Highlands Council on July 18th, both of which are going to give us some very valuable insight. And I'm also currently working with Dave Simmons on an outline for the scope of the master plan. So we are moving forward in a good direction, and hopefully we'll have some better information sooner rather than later. That having been said, I think we are.
I'm Mark Scott, 9 Pueblo Parkway. I just wanted to remind you, I wrote a letter or an email to all of you individually, throwing my hat in the ring to work on the master plan. I have a degree in in finance and urban economic studies from the University of Connecticut. I did my thesis on urban planning. I have a MBA from Purdue University. I've been in the commercial real estate business for 35 years. I'm an owner of multifamily and retail properties around the East Coast. And I do have a little bit of experience in commercial real estate. And I would just be eager to help the team. Thank you very much.
Very much appreciate that.
Mr. Scott, can you confirm when you sent your email?
Yeah, please.
I didn't
never
get one.
received it.
I didn't get one.
Did you send it like personally or like a
This was
planning?
months ago. As soon as this came up. I'll do it again.
Please, if you could forward it.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay. Maybe I sent it to the planning board secretary, I'm sorry. My error.
Might have been in
Okay.
transition.
Oh, yeah, then if it was during the transition, then it is entirely possible.
I'll
It
do it
never
again.
got forwarded.
Thank you.
Unless there's anything else, can we have a motion for adjournment?
A motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.